Oh, we're good? We're streaming? Excellent. In that weird 20-second YouTube time warp. All right, everybody, thanks for waiting. I think we're almost ready to get going. Welcome to SVVR number 70, the rebirth of our monthly meetups. My name is John, by the way, for people who have not been to Meetup before. John Oakes and Nima and Mike are all excited to get back going. So I'm going to let Nima MC it and get going. So Nima, come on up, do the first couple slides, and I'll take over.
Awesome. Hey everyone, welcome back to Silicon Valley Virtual Reality number 70. I'm so excited for everyone to be back together again, getting the community going. Really excited about this. Today we're going to have some really amazing speakers, but before we get that started, just wanted to say thank you so much to Mike, who's got an amazing streaming setup going for all of us. And thank you so much to John, who is the lifeblood of this meetup and really making it happen. So please give them both a big warm round of applause. I'm really glad to get us all back together. The community has always been about a shared passion of virtual reality and augmented reality technologies. We're all about showing new friends and just doing really cool stuff that we can show each other. And I'm really excited to get this community back together because I think that together we can also build really cool stuff together, do some experiments, and really make a difference in the virtual reality space. So without further ado, I'm going to let my co-organizers take it away.
All right. Thanks. So, again, welcome. So we've got some great speakers tonight. We've got Leo Max coming any minute now, and Jerry Ellsworth, CEO of Tilt5, is going to talk about amazing product, and pretty much Jerry gets to say whatever she wants to say, and then we'll talk about the community and where we're going. But to kind of reset the stage, because I know we have some new faces here, I wanted to tell you who we are and why we're here and why we've been doing this 70 times. We are super enthusiasts for VR, AR, XR, all the R's, and we've been, back in before even the Oculus Developer Kit 1 was really shipping. We had our very first meetup at the History Museum, the Computer History Museum, and it was electric, right? It was the first time any of us had touched this technology. And a lot of us got the bug for what we could do in a 3D space with computer games, because we're all pretty much gamers and sci-fi nerds and all that. And out of that, we developed a really strong, vibrant community of developers and enthusiasts and evangelists for this new dimension in computers. Whether it was gaming or industry, everybody had their own ideas, and we really kind of moved the industry in some ways. We had some huge conferences for a while. SVVR had an industry conference. It was the largest VR conference in the world, and we did that for a while. Then Facebook got involved and kind of took a lot of that oxygen out of the room for us. But the community is still really strong, and I think now, after COVID, we took a little break. The industry's in a really interesting place, and I'm glad you're here because I think there's a lot of new technology coming up with a lot of new ways to make a difference in whether you're a gamer or an educator or in any kind of business. All the platforms are up for grabs again. This is like, the Web3 guys have their vision for the future, and I think there's some overlap with XR and Web3, but I think the people, the consumers, your mom and dad, and your sisters and your brothers and your kids are all going to be engaged with VR in some way. And I think what really draws me to this community is we're the ones who are like the ones that they go to. You're the ones that your friends and family call when they ask, I want to get into VR, what should I get? Or, my printer's broken, why won't it work? Help me fix it. You're the people who do that. And so we want to give you a community you can rely on, that you can share ideas with, bring your demos, bring your half-baked, broken code, and we'll help you fix it, or bring your hardware idea that's cobbled together off 3D printed parts, because we want to see it, and we want to help each other succeed in this space. So anyway, welcome, thank you. We want to keep keep the momentum going. We also want some help. So if you're interested in community development, Mike and Nima and I all have full-time jobs. The people who used to run this, Carl and Nana, are wonderful people. They are not here anymore, unfortunately. We miss them dearly. And they did it as a full-time job. So it's a lot of work to put these together, to do events, to do all the administrative work. So if you have any time at all, please grab one of us, go on the Discord, and raise your hand, and we'll find something for you to do. We're not asking for a lot of work, because anybody can even give us a couple hours or come up with a venue idea or a demo idea or an event idea would be great. I'm going to take off my mask so you guys can hear me better. And we're pretty fun to work with. So if I had to put in a sentence, we're a community focused on a healthy and diverse ecosystem for XR, whether that's AR, VR. I'm not interested in the contest between those two platforms. Everyone's welcome. You don't have to be a developer. You don't have to be in this professionally. You don't have to say like I'm going to make my life in VR, but you all have something to give. That could be an idea, a concept that somebody else runs with, or some art you could create, or just being a nice person to talk to is a very valuable part of the community. So everybody here, you should meet, because you're all interesting in some way. I want to find out about that. So historically we've had monthly meetups. The question kind of for you all is, are we ready for monthly meetups again? Or should we maybe do quarterly? Something to think about. Nobody has to answer right now. But if you want to do monthly, we need a lot of help to plan, organize, and find venues. So it's a question to mull over, and we'll talk about it over the next couple hours. We also want to do events. From the past, we know we've had great success with getting the community together to do hackathons, game jams, pitch events. So this is kind of something for you to come to us with and say, yes, I'm really interested in a game jam. I kind of want you to say, please give us a hackathon. Please give us a pitch event, because that's how we'll know that one is needed. And one thing we want to do soon is a swap meet, because especially us guys who've been in the industry for a while, we have like way too many headsets, and we'd like to find homes for them. So if you don't have a VR headset and you'd like one, we want to host a swap meet where we can put a headset in your hand and say, please go do some VR. And if you're a collector of old VR headsets, even better. So we will be doing that this summer. We'll find a location and we'll get that out there. But if you have ideas for an event, like if you, for example, have a specific cause. There's a lot of causes these days, believe me, we get around. And so you want to do a hackathon around an event, or a game jam around a subject matter, or in conjunction with a charity maybe, or something like that. Bring it up. We'll try to come up with some ideas and throw them out your way, but what I'm trying to say is, don't sit back and expect or wait for us to say, here's the agenda of what we want you guys to do. We really want this to be community driven, and we'll help amplify what you want to have happen and see if we can find a community to do it. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of what I want to say there. To get in touch with us, we're all on Twitter. We're kind of Twitter focused. I should have put it up here, but I'm John Virtual, Jon Virtual, all one word. We have a Discord, which you can, if I get out of the way, you can probably scan hopefully from there, or take a picture and type it in later, or tweet at me, or look at the SVVR Live. SVVR Live is our Twitter handle, and it'll be on there as well. All right. So let's see. Yeah, so that's it. I'm not big on long-winded talks, but I want to talk to you tonight. Everybody, come say hello. If you don't know me, please come grab me and say hello, and we'll get to know each other. And if you do know me, come say hello and see me again. And so with that, now what we typically like to do is have short talks with speakers from the industry to kind of give a little perspective about what they're doing. We're first going to have Leo. You ready? Do you need it?
Yeah, we've got to log in and grab the...
Okay, great. Leo does location-based entertainment VR, and after he's done, we'll introduce Jerry to do her thing, and then there's gonna be time for mingling and demos and having a lot of fun.
Cool. I'm good to go. I've got it.
Okay, do you want me to unplug the?
Okay.
There you go. All right. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you, John. I do. I can't prepare.
You're ready,
Unlike
yeah.
you. All right, everyone. So our next speaker is the wonderful Leo, a good friend of mine. He's got a very interesting story that you guys are going to hear, and also runs one of the most popular and highly foot trafficked arcades, VR arcades in the Bay Area. So yeah, let's make it happen.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Sit down.
Give me a second here just to get this
I'll just.
on present mode. It's just standard. There you go. So, huh?
You're good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Looks okay? All right. Well, hi everyone. My name is Leo. Some of you might know me from Twitter. My handle there is Lirio. That's just the name I use on every video game since I started playing video games. But you all can call me just Leo. Like Dima said, I manage the Hero Hangout Arcade in San Mateo. Been doing it for about 4 years. About to be 5 years actually. And I love it a lot. So I'm here to talk about my learnings from LBE VR, especially some very intriguing ones that occurred to me after COVID. I mean, we're still in COVID, but after lockdown and after we got permission to open again. So start with a little quick bio. Like I said, I've been in VR since 2017. Started as a Hero Hangout 2018. So I started in 2017 working with Axie Reality. Some of you who've been in Bay Area for a while might recognize them. They don't exist anymore, but they were a startup that basically rented stations for companies for special events or just for having them for a week. Like for example, eBay, they would have those hackathons or something for their employees. And they would just rent those stations, and from there I went to the Hero Hangout. Ever since it started, they invited me to be the manager, and that's where I've been since then. I have epilepsy, which is kind of funny because VR technically is not healthy for me, but I found out that maybe I'm immortal or maybe it's just a myth. It hasn't killed me yet, so that's good. I used to be a content creator as well, both for PC games and also for VR, but that's a long way gone. I play test occasionally for Ubisoft, EA, and so for some VR game devs that are close to me. I also have the startup Run Digital, which is not yet public per se. I mean, we do have one esports league that is charity focused for high schools, so we donate headsets to high schools and then get the kids to play in the tournaments to kind of incentivize them to get better grades and focus on school and that stuff. But I'm here to talk about VR and arcades. So my most recent learnings from VR arcades, and especially after the lockdown, is that number one, people don't really care about COVID that much. When COVID started and we got all into lockdown, the first thing I went to was to look into ways to sanitize the headset, and that's where I got to Cleanbox. And then we purchased a few Cleanbox units, which they are made per order for specific headsets that you have. So we ordered a few we ordered a couple for our arcade, and we were like, oh yeah, this is gonna really make us stand out from all the other VR arcades because I don't hear anyone else talking about sanitization and everything. But ever since we reopened, nobody really asked about how much we sanitize our headsets or anything like that. In fact, not a lot of people actually wear a mask anymore inside of the arcade, which is a little weird because you're wearing a headset that is literally like attached to your face. So a little bit of extra care will be good for you, but they don't really care. Needless to say, I do sanitize headsets after each player, so they really shouldn't care, but it's a little weird to find that out. The second one, people don't read in VR. There are a lot of games that we put them on that literally have instructions right in front of them, and they will just not read. And that's really weird to me, and I have to literally tell them, like, do you see that message in front of you? And they're like, no. I'm like, just look straight ahead. And they're like, oh, okay, oh, I have to press the trigger. So do keep that in mind. People don't really read, they're more visual, especially in VR. I take it because most of my customers are having their first experience, first time in VR, so they're way too distracted and immersed in everything. So try to avoid game is aimed at starter players. Yes?
Do you notice that if you're not also there? Is it the fact that there's like another human there that they're not reading?
What do you mean?
So like if, we all learned how to use VR probably from reading stuff, right? Is that because we were alone and we were the only resource was in front of us? Like, do you think you being in the room was the reason they weren't reading?
Not really. I try to, so basically when I set them up and I get them to the station, I give them the very quick introduction to VR and what to do, and then I put them into the Steam VR tutorial, and I try to leave them alone unless I notice that they're really having a really hard time and they're not enjoying whatever time they went to the station for, then I step in, and that's usually when I'm coming in, I'm like, hey, there's like a little text in front of you to read. So even if there's no one around, they just go ham and try to press everything and get frustrated because nothing is working. And then when they realize like, oh, I should have read the tutorial, then they get used to it. They usually takes like just 1 or 2 warnings, and then they get used to like, oh yeah, I should read stuff. But yeah, having someone nearby or not having it doesn't really impact it. Number 3, Oculus unintentionally saved the arcades and LBVR in general. I say unintentionally because they have a history of not caring about us. So every 6 months or so, their terms of use regarding LB usage change, literally every 6 months, sometimes every 3 months. Sometimes they allow us to use Oculus Quest in LBE scenarios, sometimes they don't. It's always changing, but good or not, Oculus Quest did save us because it did put VR in a bunch of homes. And another interesting fact is that a lot of my new customers that are coming in, they have played Quest at some friend's house, or sometimes they even own the Quest at home, Quest 1 or 2, but yet they still come to the arcade because they want to try a bunch of different games instead of buying them individually. So regardless of how you see Meta or not, they did save LBE VR, and I'm very grateful for it. But Vive is my best friend. Vive is, I hold a lot of good thoughts to Vive, and they really support us. They really support LBE VR. And on top of that, they have just basically the most sturdy headsets ever. Let me tell you, I have some customers, I've had some very strong customers, like bodybuilders, punching those Vive controllers into the wall, and sometimes they drop it and step on them, and they will continue to work. I mean, maybe the plastic will pop off a little bit, and I just press it, and it will just snap back in place. So I really, really love Vive, especially the Vive Pro series. I haven't used the Vive Pro 2 in the arcade yet, but the Vive Pro 1 from 2018, 2017, I think, it's just amazing. They're still working just fine after 4 years. I never shut down the base stations, and one actually last week just died. So 1 out of maybe 16 base stations that I have. So if you guys ever consider doing something LBE VR, I recommend Vive. Number 5, less is more. Like I said, for the text, that's a big thing. The more you can avoid text in any LBE scenario, in any application, that would be great. Choices, if you're running a VR arcade or if you're running an LBE event, the less choices you give to your customers, the better. Because the last thing they want to do is just spend 30 minutes looking around and trying to figure out which one of the 18 packages they should check. And also for games. Specifically for VR arcades, you don't want to have 200 games like I did back in 2018, because then they would spend 30 minutes in the game menu just looking for whatever game they want to play, and then they have to click on the image, and then they have to read the description, and then watch the trailer, and then figure it out. So less is more in pretty much 99% of the cases for LBE VR. Free roam is the future of the LBE VR, because Quest 2 is putting the VR games that we had at the arcade at home, and free roam attractions such as Hologate and another one that I forgot the name now are the future for VR arcades and LBE events in general, because those games cannot be purchased and played at home. So for example, Rec from 6 is making Rec. Rec will be a great addition to VR arcades once it's ready. I'm really excited to try it out. But also all the other companies that are offering free roam, that should be the future of VR, so that as Quest 2 and other standalone headsets get into more houses, people will start looking for different things that they can do within VR that they can't do at home. And especially, I get a lot of customers that bring their friends. They have VR, but their friends don't. So arcades are still there, and free roam is perfect for that because no one has a space of 60 by 60 feet in their small apartment in the Bay Area to install, and they don't have $30,000 to license a free roam game. So I believe the future of VR arcades will be free roam games, especially Ubisoft games. They're doing a great job there, especially with the Assassin's Creed and a few other games. They're doing really, really good with free roam. Yeah.
On the free roam, could you see like facilities being almost like mingling with like the trampoline parks or other things where they're like trying to put specific things in for the free roam game that kind of augments that like reason why it can't be done at home? Would you see that being something that would be part of that future of the free roam aspect of it, or you think it's just going to be, you know, like you have the size of like a basketball court or a tennis court area, and the virtual room is taking all of the like, you know, augmentation of your, you know, of your experience?
You mean like actually using props and stuff, tracked props?
More so like, you know, if you think about, say, I don't like the game Slam Ball, right? Like it's like, you know, you have a hoop and you have the trampoline that you're running on, but, you know, having, say, a virtual tennis trampoline while still doing all, I mean, a real trampoline, but still doing all the rest of it in virtual, like, do you see that ever being a part of how you guys would make
Yes.
it like the experience? Okay.
Yes, that
Volleyball
definitely.
on the moon or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
that
thinking,
definitely
you know?
improves the experience. There is actually one arcade called Game Day VR here in the Bay Area that they are working with some very impressive developers. Yes.
Have you tried Sandbox VR or when
Yes. Yeah, they're very close to the Gear Hangout, and I always recommend my customers to go there, and their customers come to us, and they're really amazing. The only downside is that they don't have a lot of games. That's the only downside for them. They have like 5 games, and 3 of them are pretty much the same thing, just different skins.
Yeah, they told me they were custom.
Yeah.
Yeah, they make their own games. Yeah, they make their own games, and they use those I forgot the name, but those
Striker.
there are some guns that
Striker.
The striker guns. Yeah, they use the Vive controllers inside of them. But as far as I know, they don't have any props in the actual room that the users can use. But for example, Arizona Sunshine has a free roam game that uses you can use custom props. So for example, you can build a custom platform with a bunch of that space shakers in the bottom, and when you're crossing the wooden bridge, it starts shaking. And when you go to the helicopter, you're actually sitting on a prop helicopter that shakes and lifts you up in the air and stuff like that. And I think free roam using real props and track props will be definitely amazing and definitely the way to go. Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption.
Sorry?
Sorry for the
Oh,
interruption.
no, you're fine. Number 7, good service and training matters more than anything in LBE, because let's just face it, even though we are all pros in VR here, most people don't have a clue what VR is. And knowing how to service them and knowing how to train people to service them are the most important things, especially in arcades, in VR arcades, but also for any LBE events and external VR events. Knowing how to onboard someone is especially important. Number 8, private events are where the money is. In the arcade, we rent the stations by the minute, by the hour, and then they can play as many games as they want during that time. But that is really not our moneymaker. Our moneymaker are for private events, which are corporate outings and birthday parties, and those are the ones where we rent the whole arcade just for their group, and that's where the money is. But you do have to have, especially in VR arcades, you do have to have a few stations and a few options for people to just walk in and try it out, because that's when they're gonna think, oh yeah, my friend's having a birthday in a month, so I should rent out a place, and that's where the money is. It does make it way more profitable than just renting it out forever. And private events, especially with VR, increase the price tag a lot, and people feel like it's worth their money when it has VR in it. So yeah, definitely focus on private events if anyone has VR arcade or planning on opening VR arcade or doing any events, especially private events inside of companies like XRally did. That's where the money is. Number 9, developers are missing out on LBVR. It's not that secretive, but a lot of VR game developers that I talk tend to just ignore LBVR because they think, oh yeah, VR arcades are dying, or like, oh, I'm not gonna make a lot of money. But in fact, you're just making recurring revenue. The way it works for VR arcades is that we pay the developers by the minute the game is open. So instead of you just selling your game one time to a gamer, to a player, You can just license to an arcade and you get paid monthly. So for example, our most played game in the arcade is Alvin Assassin, which is a game from 2016, I think, that the dev keeps updating. I love it. The dev keeps updating, and I think before we shut down, we alone were paying them about $700 a month, just one arcade. And there's like 5,000 arcades in the United States alone that have VR. So just do the math. As long as you make a game that works and that the arcade owners are happy with it, you're probably gonna make some pretty good revenue, recurring revenue. And then number 10, automation is king. Running a VR arcade is extremely stressful and a lot of stuff breaks, especially in VR. You guys know how much VR tends to break. When you have 16 different VR stations in there, you have 16 times more errors. So anything that you can automate will save a lot of time. So for example, in my arcade, I automate shutdowns and turn-ons and opening programs and shutting down and changing volume levels and that kind of stuff. But also some of that automation can be done automatically for you depending on which commercial licensing system you use. The major ones are Springboard and Synthesis. Both of them have a lot of automation in them. But the more you can automate in general, the better it will be. So now for some tips and tricks for both the arcade operators and developers. So it's a bunch of do's and don'ts that I collected over the years that will help a lot. So for arcade operators, what I found that really helped is, of course, number one, to be a gamer. I've met a lot of arcade owners, VR arcade owners that don't really play video games, and you don't really get the feel of like which games will actually be interesting for people if you don't play them. So being a gamer is definitely a prerequisite, and it might sound impressive for you guys, but I've met a lot of people that really don't like games and they just care about money. Do learn about PCs in VR, and that's because of the errors. You do have to be a little bit of a technical support person to be able to fix a bunch of errors, especially Windows random errors that happen when you have a bunch of different stations that have the same exact configuration, the same specs and everything, and then just one randomly just dies or does something weird. So you do have to have a little bit of technical support knowledge. Try to learn as much as you can. Try to study whatever the VR headset you're using to know how to fix common errors. Do keep it visual. That's also because of the text that I mentioned so many times ago, that the more visual information you can give, the better it is for a VR arcade. So the less text you have, the less time they will be standing still reading. The more visual, the more images, the more videos you have, the better it is for them to process everything faster. And that comes from like trailers of games, that comes for tutorials, that goes for explaining the game packages. Anything you can make a video out of will help a lot. Do provide exceptional service. Like I said, that's the main things, exceptional service, and do constant training on your team, because regardless of how ugly your arcade looks, if you're good at onboarding people and bringing them into VR and giving them a good experience, they will come back forever. I have a family of customers that they all purchase Pass 2s after they play with us, and they keep coming back, bringing their friends, because their friends don't have Pass 2s, and the number one reason they told us is because we provide good service. So they had other options. There's game day in San Francisco, game day in Alameda, Hayward, there's Sandbox, and even people that go to Sandbox, they keep coming back to us because they prefer how we treat them, how we train them, and of course there are different game selections. Do ask and provide feedback. So asking feedback from your customers is number one thing. Definitely ask feedback after each one of our customers, because they will tell you what they liked and what they didn't. Sometimes, a few times I had to remove a few games that I really loved, especially, how's it called? Raw Data from Servius. I love that game, but no one loved it. No one of my arcade customers loved it, so I had to remove it. But also provide feedback for the developers. So if you have some games that you really like and you're noticing that customers are having problems, contact the developers or contact the commercial licensing system, the company that licenses for you, and provide feedback so they can pass it over. And also for the company that licenses it for you, you can provide feedback for them of things they would like to see in there. And in my case, I use Synthesis, and they've done a lot of updates that I asked just because I told them to. It's like, hey, I really would like to do this. A week later, it's done. Do network. That's very important for VR arcade owners. There is 2 Facebook groups for VR arcade owners where there's like the public one, there's 300 people, I think, and then the private one, there's probably over 1,000 arcade owners, and that's where we all hang out and we chat, we exchange tips and tricks, we discuss different offerings, and networking is very important. That's where I learned about 90% of what I know. And to contact developers, but that's also, aside from the providing feedback, contact developers when you see a game that you would like to see in your arcade, but it's not available. It's not legal to just go on Steam and buy a game and then just sell it to others. You have to license it. So if you have a game that you really like, contact them. That happened with the Starcade arcade guys. I contacted them, asked them to put in the synthesis commercialized system, and they put it in there, and it's making a lot of money. Especially the Space Slurpees one, which is the little VR snake game. I love that one. Those are the main tips for arcade owners. And then the main mistakes that you should avoid would be don't lose patience. People might sound very dumb. The customers might sound like they really don't understand anything in life, but just try to be really patient. I swear to God, sometimes it's hard. Just try to be very patient, and especially with the hardware. Hardware just randomly fails, especially in VR, so you do have to be very patient. Don't ignore customers, and that is, like I said, I try to avoid being constantly present with them when they're playing VR, but I also am always paying attention. So if I notice that they're having a hard time and they can't open up the menu or something like that, I just go up to them and tell them, hey, you should press this button, or if you're stuck in this game, you should go to this area and shoot this way, or press this, go to this room, or whatever. Just give them a little bit of tips. That makes it a lot more, it reduces a lot of the chances of them being frustrated with it. Don't ignore networking. Like I said, do networking. Do not ignore, I put it again, just because it is very important. Don't ignore your neighbors. If you are like me in downtown San Mateo, offer special packages for your neighbors. All the businesses around, just tell them like, hey, if your employees want to come play with me, I'll give you like 25% discount. Just never ignore your neighbors because they will bring you a lot of business. Don't ignore social media because that's where millennials and Gen Zers are, and that's where your money will mostly come from. So do not ignore social media. I personally ignore social media a lot, so that's kind of like a reminder to myself that I have to update a lot of the social media. But definitely be on there, be on Instagram, maybe TikTok, but Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook are must-haves. You have to at least have a page there, and also Yelp. Yelp's really good. Don't stop learning. Always be looking for something. Always be searching for reading the news blogs, looking for different alternative ways to fix whatever error, looking for different systems, different games. Just always be looking for something. You never know when you might just catch a special gem that you can bring onto your arcade and no one else will have. Don't avoid advertising. You don't need to do a lot because VR kind of sells itself and word of mouth goes a long way. But do invest a little bit in advertising, especially for private events, especially for like specific keywords like birthday parties or corporate events and stuff like that. Just having a little bit of a small ad in there on Google Maps or Yelp or Google search, just saying VR and birthday party will sell itself. The last one, don't hate on the competition. Like I said, Sandbox, they're really close to us and they should be like our rivals. But I love them and I tell my customers to go there and then they tell their customers to go to us. So if you treat them well, if you have other arcades around, tell your customers about the differences. Tell them to go and try it out. And then they will come back and tell you and give you feedback of what they liked over there that you can have it on, or what they didn't like that you can avoid. So never hate on competition. We're all here to just grow together. In VR in general, we just can't really hate on anybody. We're all just helping everybody. For VR developers, that's specifically for VR game developers, because that's the main product in VR arcades. Do look into LBVR. I can connect to if you guys are making games and you're looking to get into arcades. I can connect you with Springboard and Synthesis. You can grab my email later. and I can do that for you. Do contact VR Arcades, ask them what kind of games they're looking for. If you're looking into developing a game specifically for arcades, we will be the ones to tell you which ones we're needing the most. Do adapter games. So a lot of the game developers bring their games to VR arcade licensing systems, and they don't just do anything. And an issue that I have with that is that a lot of games don't have a tutorial. A lot of games have the player click like 6 times before they can get into a game. And sometimes just adapting, changing a little bit of the menu, or just making a custom parameter for the arcade they can launch and put you straight into the game really helps wonders and can really help your game make more money. Because the easier it is for us to get the customer into the game, the more we will recommend that game for the customers, and the more you get paid for it. Ask and provide feedback as well. Ask feedback from both the arcade licensing systems as well from the arcade owners that are using your game, and also provide feedback for the licensing systems on the stuff that you would like to see. There are a few, like the Starkid Arcade guys, they provided a bit of feedback to Synthesis that later I heard that helped Synthesis onboard more games. I'm not aware of what exactly, but apparently there was some stats in there that were too confusing, and just from them just telling them that really fixed it. To keep it simple, you don't need to make the next Half-Life Alyx to make money in VR arcades. Please don't. I prefer the simple games. I prefer like Alvin Assassin is my favorite because you have a bow and arrow and you have to shoot the orcs and defend your town, and you can play with your friends. That's it. That's all the game is. Maybe you can shoot some spells, but I don't even tell my customers about that. They just love shooting arrows at orcs. So sometimes you're trying to make something very complex, and if you just make it very simple, look into whatever sub-genre that is missing, ask the arcade owners which one is missing, make a simple one, and then you can improve from there. Do consider free roam. Like I said, that's where the future of your arcades is. So depending on the size of your team, if you have the budget to develop free roam games, that's where it will be. But of course, that comes with a lot of investment by special trackers and special guns like Striker and stuff like that, and developing it in a warehouse scale, but that's where the future is. Do provide tutorials and tips, please provide tutorials for the customers, and maybe provide tips for the arcade owners. A lot of games don't have tutorials, and then we have to teach them, or the tutorial is just extremely hidden. So even if it's just a 2-minute tutorial, that will help the customers a lot and will help us a lot. And do offer marketing materials. That helps us a lot as well. So Servius, when they made, I think it was Servius, when they made the Westworld game in VR, they provided us with some giant posters. Like, I'm talking about like 10-foot tall posters, and I just glued them to the window, and that just brought a bunch of people in because Westworld was on Netflix or something. Everyone knew about it, so everyone was just walking in. Oh, you have a VR Westworld? Oh, can I play that? So sometimes just a little flyer, just a PDF. Sometimes a little banner that you can use on digital ads for your game, that really helps. And especially for our websites, we would like to have some decent videos, some decent pictures that we can use on our websites and we can use on our systems to properly identify your game. So a little bit of marketing material goes a long way. For the mistakes to avoid for VR game developers, of course, don't ignore LBVR unless you don't want to make money, I guess. Don't stop gaming, and that sounds kind of obvious, but what I mean with it is don't overwork yourself. Do keep gaming, do take time to stop working on your game, and do play a little bit, because personally from helping a lot of VR game dev friends test their games, I've noticed that a lot of them are working too much, and you do need to stop a little bit, and sometimes you end up playing a game, even if it's a flat game, you end up playing a game and catching something that you can implement into your game. So just don't overwork yourself. I know how much you guys work too much, and I don't want to see any of my friends getting sick. Don't complicate controls, please. Shooting is always with a trigger. I don't know why some games decided that shooting is an A button, and I hate that. But if you want to complicate your controllers, at least give us the options to change them. Like, for example, the sports games that we have are made by Vive, and they by default are, for example, if you're playing ping pong or tennis, by default they're on the left hand. and most people are running but they have the option in there in the settings, and they save them, and it saves across different launchers, and then we just change them all to the right hand. So if you do have to have a bunch of buttons doing a bunch of things, at least just give us the options to change, because we might need to change some things because it doesn't work for our customers. Don't be afraid to copy. There's nothing wrong with making another VR zombie shooter. As much as I personally hate them, every time a new one comes out, customers love them. So if you can make something different, or if you can make VR zombie shooters easier for arcade owners to run, you will sell. As well as rhythm games, for example. If you want to copy Beat Saber like 80 other games copy, you can do that. I mean, I have Pistol Whip in there, Synth Riders in there, and they're both selling a lot. And also, what's that one? The one with the shapes, O-Shape? O-Shape's also starting to sell a lot. So there's nothing wrong with copying whatever is popular, whatever's trendy. Because for VR arcades, most people are trying VR for the first time. So don't worry about people complaining, oh, it's another zombie shooter. They'll be like, oh yes, it's a zombie shooter, I want that. As well, don't ignore social media. That's where I find most of the games, especially on Twitter. That's where I find most of the VR games that I try to onboard them into commercial systems so that I can use them. So if you're not on social media, most likely I will not find out about you or your game. Don't skip conferences, because basically that's where the arcade owners go to that is not on Facebook on a private group. So that's where you're mainly going to be able to meet a lot of your arcade owners that are not from your state, that are not from whatever area you are, or whatever the area the conference is. And that's where you can get a lot of feedback, you can contact them, and you can do a lot of networking. And then don't take too long. Like I said don't complicate controls, and don't be afraid to copy. If you have a game that is working, but you would like to add 500 different story modes to it, or 13 different weapons, don't worry too much. You can add them later, just ship it out. A close friend of mine likes to say that the great is the enemy of the good. So if you have something that is good and is working, and you want to try it out, especially in LBE, just ship it. Ship it and use the feedback, and use the free time you have after you ship it to implement whatever new things you want. Just a little icebreaker, because I like that. I never thought I would have an anime girlfriend, but here we are. That's a very stupid joke, but I love that joke. And then for my favorites, to end it, because I don't want to take too much time. Favorite games, I don't know where that S is from, but Elven Assassin, like I said, do copy those if you guys are looking to build games for VR arcades. Elven Assassin is the one for you to check on the simplicity and automation, specifically because Elven Assassin has custom launch parameters for Steam and also for the arcade systems that allow us to put a bunch of different players into one map automatically, so they don't even see the main menu. So as soon as I tell them, I'm going to put you in an awesome game, and press play, they're in a game. So that's really amazing. Super Hot VR for the play along tutorial. That's a style of tutorial I really like. The player to start playing the game and just pressing different things, and the game tells them what to do. That's a lot better than just still images and flipping pages in VR, and nobody likes that. Blast On for the UI design, it's just amazing. It works and no one ever complained. No one ever had a hard time finding buttons, finding menus in Blast Assassin and other games they had. Propagation VR for the customizations, that's also on the automation side of things. On my end, as an arcade manager, when I launch someone in Propagation VR, I can choose to put them in the tutorial or don't put them in the tutorial because they're returning, how long the game will last, because this is a turn game, how many other players, what their names will be in VR. So it pulls out that data from the customer profile that I have, and a bunch of other things. So customizations on the back end for the arcade owner is really amazing. And the game itself, I mean, it's just worth it. It's a really amazing game. I recommend everyone play. And then Arizona Sunshine, if you're looking to make a story-based game, Arizona Sunshine, as old as it is amazing. The story is funny, and it's not super difficult. There's not a lot of things that, it's not the kind of story that you have to bring your phone out and Google it to figure it out a secret. It's a pretty obvious story, but it's funny and it's awesome and it's short. And it is amazing for VR arcades, because I've had a few customers that have come 5 days in a row because they wanted to beat Arizona Sunshine, and every time they bought 30 minutes because they thought 30 minutes was enough to play the story. And then on the last day they bought 2 hours and then they beat it. So story modes are amazing. Just don't make them excessively long, like Half-Life Alyx. But under 2 hours would be amazing. And then for licensing, Synthesis VR, like I said, is my favorite. And there's also Springboard. Those are the 2 main ones. There's also Portal VR, if I'm not wrong, but they're really small. Synthesis currently is the best one in my opinion. The UI and the UX on the back end is horrible. It takes a long time to learn. It's very basic. It's all 2D, and it's basically it's designed by a developer, not by a designer kind of thing. So it is a steep learning curve, but they have a gazillion amount of features for arcade owners and also for the game developers, a bunch of different stuff, and they support free roam. So that's my favorite. Springboard is a good starter if you are not very familiar with VR, not very familiar with PC and stuff. Their UX experience, the UI is amazing on both the back end and the front end for the customers, especially the menu. It's very beautiful. It's a system designed by designers, but not developed by developers. So you got the both sides that you can choose from. For free roam, why it's keeping dropping letters there? I don't know. Zero latency and Hologate are the main ones that come to mind. Do look it up. Search them on Google. Pretty easy to find. Zero latency, they license, they have franchise system only, so you can only open up a zero latency location. You can't just bring one game to your arcade. But on Hologate, you can bring one game, or you can bring one hardware that they have, because they make like custom cars and motorcycles and ships and stuff. So you can buy them separately if you already have an arcade and not looking to just have another brand, another franchise, and start your own. For treadmills, I say approach carefully because I've tried it and it's kind of not ideal for arcades right now, but do keep a lookout because it might be a solution for locations that are very small that cannot have free roam attractions. That is a good solution. So Cat VR and Omni, they're pretty much the same-ish, but Cat VR is kind of making the headlines right now with the Seawalk, Catwalk C2. They're making it a lot better. I had the Cat VR Premium in the arcade when I first opened, and it was amazing, but the learning curve was very steep for us to have customers onboarding and playing for 15 minutes. It took them a whole 30 minutes to get used to the walk-in system. So we decided to get rid of it. But they're doing a lot of improvements to their units right now, so it might be something to look into later. And Omni, they have whole arenas. I mean, Cat VR also have arenas, but they don't really advertise. But Omni by Virtuix, they have whole arenas where you can buy 6 units in one. They come in and build the walls, and everything has LEDs, like all the gamers love and everything. And it is a little more arcade friendly per se. It's aimed at arcades actually. Those are the 2 main ones that I would recommend to look into, but definitely don't jump into if you're opening an arcade for the first time. And that's pretty much it. Sorry for the bugs in the text. I don't know what happened. But yeah, hope you guys got some interesting facts from me. And if you guys have any questions.
Yeah.
I went to an arcade in Cupertino. They call it a barcade, I guess. And they have pinball machines on the first floor. And the second floor was PS3s and PCs and all this kind of stuff. And every other thing was going to be the PS4 and 5. And they were just going to add it on. And so what do you think about mixing everything up and also having food and wine and beer?
Yeah, so food and drinks are a big problem if you have them very close to VR stations, but they're definitely a good way to bring customers into the arcade. As far as other consoles, we have those in the Your Hangout. So I have a room with all the video games from Atari all the way to PlayStation 2 in there with a bunch of TVs and a Matrix. And we also have some retro arcades, the Miss Pac-Man 1, Street Fighter, and I think Rampage. We have those, and we offer those for free. So people can just walk in and they can play the arcades and they can play the video games for free. We only charge for VR. That is a great solution because people just come in and try and just pass the time sometimes, and then they're like, oh yeah, I should probably try VR. It's definitely a good seller. As far as actually renting those stations, like a video game arcade kind of stuff, I'm not really a fan because then you're kind of playing against yourself, because then if you have a PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 with the latest games in there, then the customers would most likely prefer to play those games because that's the ones that their friends are talking about, that's the ones that are popular everywhere, instead of going into VR. So if you want to bring like video games and arcades, bring the old ones that are not releasing any games anymore up to PlayStation 3, and just grab a few of the classics of each unit and just leave it in there for people to play for free and pass the time, especially when they're waiting for the reservation. It's a good way to pass time.
Yeah, see, that's what I thought. If you brought in like 6 kids, 3 kids would play in VR, and the others would be running around. So you need some kind of supervision, and something for the parents to do. Or maybe they're going to take off and let you
Exactly.
do kids, right?
Yep.
You have to manage kids, and then you know what I mean. Or if the parents do stay, maybe that's tough for them. Something to do.
Yeah, it is a nightmare when the parents just leave the arcade. That happens sometimes.
I know they drop
Yeah.
off like 10 kids to go see it, and then
Yes, that happens sometimes, and I try to just hold them in and say, hey, I'm not responsible for your children, but sometimes they do. But every time I always introduce them to their game room, and they usually just go there and stay there for the whole duration. Most of the parents just love to replay the games that they like to play when they were their children's age. So yeah, it's definitely a good addition that I try to recommend to every arcade owner. It's just something for the clients to pass time while they wait for their reservation, because most of them in general tend to arrive very early, like 30 minutes or 45 minutes before the reservation. And then you have customers already playing, and if you don't have anything for them to do, they'll just walk away and go somewhere else. And then when they come back, they're going to be like 5-10 minutes. So yeah, it's definitely a good idea to have video games and other free attractions, free stuff that they can pass the time on. Yeah.
So you sort of touched on this a little bit. Can you talk about multiplayer? Is that really complicated because you're trying to coordinate a bunch of people? Is it popular?
Yeah, multiplayer is definitely popular. Most people that come to the arcade, they come in 2s or 4s. They very rarely come alone. Multiplayer is very popular, and it is kind of a must for VR arcades, but it can be complicated if the game doesn't do a good job of teaching, or if the game doesn't do a good job of bringing the players into the multiplayer session. So for example, if you have, let me think of a game here. I can't come to mind right now because all my games are heavily optimized and I only have the ones that work for me. But there were a few ones that each customer had to launch in their own headset, open the menu and launch the game, and then they have to go and wait 30 seconds for the logos to show up because it's not skippable, and then they have to click on continue and then play and then multiplayer and then create a server and then type a password, and then the other person has to figure out the password, and then you're running around telling like, hey, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go to another one, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So multiplayer is definitely the best thing for arcades right now, because people just want to play with their friends, honestly. And there's always, from now on, there's always going to be one in the group who has tried a Quest, has tried a Vive. That's happening to me all the time since we reopened. And usually in the groups, there's always one that tried VR and the other ones that didn't, and usually that one is the one who brought them. So most likely will be most of the customers will be in groups. So if you can make multiplayer games, that's the way to go. But just please contact the arcade licensing systems and figure out how to automate on the back end, so that we don't have to suffer and the customers don't have to spend a lot of time figuring out how to get into the same game, because that matters a lot. Some games that take a long time actually makes the customers feel like they're not really using the 30 minutes that they paid for, because they spent 4 minutes trying to figure out how to get into the game. Yeah.
What specific genres of games do you find are the most popular? Like, people gravitate towards flight sims or shooty bang bang games or exploration games, or what do you find are the hot ones versus the ones that you kind of have to phase out faster?
Yeah, so wave shooters in general are still the #1. And I'm not saying just zombie ones, I'm saying any wave shooters. It doesn't need to be zombies. Like Alvin Assassin does not have zombies. It's just orcs and dragons and giants. Wave shooter is definitely #1 if it's made well, if it has a decent amount of variety of enemies, or it stays entertaining for after 5 minutes, definitely #1. And then fighting games and sports games, actually. Sports games are growing a lot. A lot of my customers, especially the young kids that are 15 to 11 years old-ish, they always come in and they're like, you have baseball, you have ping pong, you have tennis. And I'm like, yes. And then later I asked them, and actually they play that in school. So they just want to play in VR, I guess, because it's VR. I don't really get it, but sports is growing a lot in VR, in arcades specifically. Music games as well, it's always entertaining, especially for the parents that some parents come in and bring their kids and they ask us specifically to not allow them to play any gore games, any violent games, any zombie shooter games. And then they usually tend to prefer the music games, actually, the kids and the parents. They really like the music games. And as of right now, I only have O-Shape, Hustle It, and then Synth Riders. So if I could have a few more that are really good, I'll really appreciate it. But yeah, wave shooters, music games, I think some puzzle games and kind of like escape rooms, but not literally escape rooms, because escape rooms in here are kind of boring. But if you have some type of puzzle games like that, Indiana Jones VR game that I always forget the name, that is recent, that just came out. Some type of exploration / puzzle game that is themed on a specific age or a specific like fantasy world or something, really goes well. People really love it. For example, the one that I call it a puzzle for my customers is Super Hot. Because Super Hot, even though it's technically a shooter fighting game, every level you have to figure it out how to kill the enemies and how to survive and how to dodge the bullets, and they really love it. So anything that makes them really step back and think before they do anything, or figure it out whatever way to go through that is not just shooting or punching or doing something, goes a long way. And then fighting games, if it's not realistic, it does really well. If it's realistic, I found that people don't really like to fight against each other in a realistic graphic game. So for example, Creed is one of the games that I'll probably be removing soon, because they don't really like it. They feel like they're actually punching their friends, even though one is Rocky Balboa and the other one is like Creed. They feel like they're punching each other. So if you can make any cartoony fighting games, most of the arcades will love it. Anything with like superpowers or stuff like that, think of a cartoon Street Fighter kind of game, would go really well. Yes?
Do roguelites? Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Do those, like, there's a couple of roguelite games that I've seen come out recently. Those seem like they may be well suited to an arcade environment. Is that observed?
Only if the playtime, because like if you're really good, you can just survive forever. But there is an average survival time in roguelites where you have to die and you end up dying and resetting. If the average survival time is short enough, like under 5 minutes, that would do well. Otherwise, I had one that I think it was Carnage or something like that. Carnage VR was a RPG roguelike. That average playtime was 30 minutes, and people on average buy 30 minutes in the VR arcade. Some buy 1 hour, and very few ones buy 2 hours, a few regulars that I have. But most of them pay for 30 minutes, and they want to try as many games as they want. So if you want to hook them into a roguelike, the average survival time has to be 5 minutes, and those 5 minutes got to be really addicting for them to want to do a rerun and keep playing.
So what's the average like time they spend in a single game? You said it's like 5 minutes.
It's on average, if they don't like the game, it's 5 minutes. So usually you have 5 minutes to hook them so that you can keep getting paid by the minute from that station. But if they like the game, they tend to stay in there for the whole 30 minutes. So for example, Elven Assassin is one of my favorites because 99% of people love it, and I don't have to suggest any other games. I can just sit back and watch them learn and figure it out. And it usually hooks them for 30 minutes. Usually they end up buying more minutes as well, just to keep playing because they want to get to the next wave or whatever. So yeah, usually you have 5 minutes to just hook the customer. Yes.
So, I mean, I have not played an APAR. I don't know, but can you save the player, like the status? Can you like save a level and come back?
Game? Yeah, some games offer that. Most of them don't.
But the thing is, I mean, if you want to have playtime, you want to have games where people come back. I would say.
Yeah. So for example, one solution that Arizona Sunshine proposed is that on Arizona Sunshine Arcade, which is a version that is not available on Steam and Oculus, you actually have access to each one of the levels that you are in the story. So you can go to the mines, you can go to the start, you can go to each of the parts. You can just jump into that one and start from there. And then on my end, I can control which guns they start with, if they have infinite ammo, if they have this, if they have that. So I can program that on my end, which I do. I have infinite ammo. We always start with 2 pistols. And then when the customer comes back and they want to continue from the mines, they can just choose from the mines. that's one way to kind of save progress, but it would be really hard to save progress individually for every single customer on a regular basis, like Steam Cloud and stuff like that, because then we need to integrate with the arcade licensing system and figure out the client registration on the arcade server itself. So yeah, usually save games are hard to deal with, but if you have, like, for example, Arizona Sunshine way to work with, which is literally just a level selector, that can work for long story-based games.
You mentioned that Elven Assassin, you pay them out like on average $700 sometimes here. How many games would you say in a month go above 250 that you're like you guys are paying out? Or development studios to be, you know.
Yeah, so my arcade, just to give you some idea, in my arcade we have 4 VR stations,
Okay.
and then we have 1 racing station, so it's not big. It's definitely small, super small. Games that are going above the 200 margin, I want to say maybe 10 games.
Yeah.
But that's still a lot of money from
Absolutely.
an arcade that only has 4 stations.
Definitely.
And again, it might sound like I'm spending a lot, but also all the money comes direct from private events. So technically, on the walk-in sessions, I'm losing money because I'm paying by the minute, but then I'm charging by the hour for a whole private event. But yeah, I would say
Are
about
the
10
walk-in
games.
sessions licensed the same way on the dev side? I mean, are the private events licensed the same way on the dev side? So like.
Yeah, so I decide how much I want to charge my customers for it.
Right.
But yeah, basically, when a developer gets onboarded, they choose how much they want to get paid by the minute. And it's on average from 4 cents to 18 cents per minute, being like the most amazing, most played games. And they usually start on about 7 cents per minute. And that's the amount you're going to get paid from every single arcade by the minute.
Yeah, whether that's private or the other way, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm sorry, John.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, no, this is really great. Clearly, there's a lot of interest. It was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
I learned a lot because my day job is I run a VR lab.
Yes.
And I was like thinking there's a lot of applicable lessons here for me too. So anyway, everyone, Leo, thank you. And the only other thought I had for you was, does Hero Hangout big enough for a meetup?
Yeah, I was asked that before. I don't
Saw
think
that coming.
so. I think we can, because the stations we have are X reality stations, so they're quite huge. We might be able to have like 20, 25 people in there, but no more than that, because just the stations take a long time.
All right. Well, that's okay. We'll
Yeah,
come. We'll do a
take
field
lot of
trip.
space. But yeah, like
All
I said,
right.
like I told you on Twitter, I can look into the Draper
Yeah, great.
locations.
No, for sure, and I'll definitely want to. Full mind of information. I hope you guys all start VR arcades now. Jerry, you're up. I'm so happy to have Jerry join us tonight. I've been a fan of Jerry Ellsworth since before she even joined Steam, because I used to watch you do FPGA YouTube tutorials.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so I've been along for the ride for a long time, and I'm really excited where you're at with Tilt 5 these days. You all know about Tilt 5, right? Anybody not know about Tilt 5? Your job is done. Look,
All right, my job. See ya. Nice knowing you.
So yeah, we invited Jerry to talk, and she's a great speaker. I've seen her speak a few times, just about everything. So my wish for her is just to talk about whatever she wants to talk about. You all know about her company, but she can talk about that or anything else. So the floor is yours. Do you need a PowerPoint at all or anything?
No, I think I can just plug in. You know, I really resonated with that last talk, being a child from the 80s, you know, being an arcade rat. It was so fun. I'm so glad that our younger generation is going to have those same kind of communal experiences. And, you know, you talk about, you know, trouble onboarding people. We've been learning a lot about that ourselves as we start going to more trade shows. We've converted almost all of our demos now to one-button interactions. Even we go to things like Games Beach or Games Developer Conference, you'd think they would know complicated inputs, but you know, once they get into, you know, the experience, they just lose their minds as far as listening. They don't read anything. You're right. It didn't help putting any kind of menus on there. So, you know, it's almost embarrassing. Some of our experiences are just pull the trigger, and people are still losing their minds over it. Well, you know, they asked me to come here and talk about anything. I didn't know what to do with that, so I grabbed a couple of my presentations, mushed them together, and we'll see where it goes. feel free to stop me along the way. We're a nice, small, intimate group here, so if you have questions, we'll just free form it. The folks also told me that, they'd love to see technical stuff. So I brought exploded versions of our glasses and our wand. Figured like this would be the audience that really appreciate looking at all the little optical bits and all the little Easter eggs we put on the circuit board. So I have a little pile of things that you can just look at. Don't worry, this is factory reject stuff, so if you drop it and things pop out, that's okay. A little bit about me. Yeah, I have a very strange background. I started off as a race car driver as a kid, so that was my first career. It was super fun, did that for 5 years. Then I opened a chain of retail computer stores in the 90s. It was a really awesome thing to be doing back in the 90s. Everyone was getting their AOL discs and getting online, and we had a great time. I actually opened a network gaming center back before broadband was a thing. Man, we had so much time playing, a good time playing like Counter-Strike and games like that. Then high-speed internet came and destroyed all that. And then I moved down to Silicon Valley and brute forced my way into startups. Having not been trained in doing electrical engineering or product design, I just took the bold move, like I can figure this out, and went around and talked to a bunch of entrepreneurs and shook their hands, probably a lot of folks like you, and like, hey, take a chance on me, like I'm very passionate about this, and got a couple breaks, and kind of launched my career, got a reputation as like, go grab this person, she knows how to put a team together and solve tough problems really quick, and got my career started like that. Had a couple of viral hits, which people seem to remember me most for these, like some toys that I designed that just like kind of went viral before we even knew what viral was, and got to work on rockets. That was fun, all without a college degree and a high school dropout. A few years ago, Valve Software hired me to put together their hardware R&D department. So again, I resonated when you said HTC. I'm like, oh, my team. Like that was the stuff we were working on there. And when I was at Valve, Gabe Newell, the founder of the company, gave me the mission to put a team together and just find a way to bring the whole family together. He says there's a problem in the gaming space. You have silos of gamers and they don't really cross in the middle. So, in your living room, you might have someone playing on their phone, a casual game. Your kids might be playing on the Xbox, and they're just staring off in their own different directions. And then there's a whole group of people that don't game because it feels like it's not inclusive for them. So that was a really exciting goal that he set for us. And so we assembled this really amazing team, and we researched everything. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars of Gabe's money just trying everything. We went out and got military head-mount displays. We hooked up medical trackers to it. It's like, what would be VR? What would it be like if we could just do it perfectly? And it's like, oh, this is really cool. And we're doing AR systems the same way. We're hooking electrodes to people's brains and feeding that into the director of the game, seeing if we could increase engagement, aka addiction, to games. Which is a little side comment, also got me thinking about ethics in a lot of different areas after doing that. Because yeah, we could actually, if you read people's emotions, get them more hooked on games. While I was there was a kind of a silly accident I had one day just playing around with some optics where I discovered this clever optics that allows us to do AR. And Valve was really hard over on VR, and they didn't want to do it. They ended up cutting the whole AR team, let us go. And a couple of us decided to go to Gabe and buy the technology, this optical technique from them. Started a startup, it's called Cast AR. Maybe some of you, since you're in the space, remember that. That was a learning experience. I had never done a venture-backed startup, although I'd worked in dozens of startups over the years. I learned some lessons, like one of the things, I was too scared to be the leader of the company, the CEO, so I went out and hired an external CEO to run the company, who wasn't too bad in the early days. As soon as we got some big money, some big investments, our investors were like, well, that scrappy startup CEO is no good, we're gonna bring in the big guns, and we're gonna do a moonshot for this. And so I had to sit back and watch this dream of bringing families together, playing games like evaporate out in front of me as they just drove us off a cliff. Fortunately for me, just out of the blue, I'm sitting in an office crying in my beer. I get this phone call, and it's like, "Hey Jerry, it's Nolan." I'm like, Nolan Bushnell, founder of Atari. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, hi." And he's like, "I got to see one of your prototypes many months ago, and it's going to change the world. It's magic. You know, I just want to give you some advice. Like, you should figure out how to get this going and make it happen. I don't know how to tell you how to do it, but just do it." And so I went out to all my mentors, and I started asking, like, I just had this embarrassing crash and burn. Like, is it possible to do another startup? And they're like, "Oh, gosh, you're in Silicon Valley. You always hear about, you know, someone had a great idea and they had this like giant company overnight, but what you actually find out in the background is that they failed probably 5 times on startups in very embarrassing ways until they figured it out." So I grabbed some of the folks from Cast AR, like the people that were the true believers, the hardest workers, and we founded Till 5. And we took our own life savings, we put it in, we bought the assets back, and we bootstrapped the company for the first half of the year. Talk about terrifying doing that. Like, it was like all chips on the table kind of moment for me. But we got another chance. And so this is, you know, what I'm working towards. It's our team like believes in this. We've seen this for 40, 50 years in movies, like people coming together, you know, collaborating, playing games around holographic displays. And so that wasn't possible for the longest time until now. And, you know, I'm an avid gamer myself, right? You mentioned you gotta be a gamer, right? So when we started Till 5, you know, we had a lot of different directions we could go with this piece of technology, and we evaluated them all. You know, someone's like, well, maybe we can do location-based experiences, or maybe we can do enterprise, medical, and we evaluated all of them, but we kept coming back to gaming because, like, in our core, we're all gamers. We understood the space better. And, you know, frankly, the bar is maybe just a tiny bit lower for entertaining people than actually making, say, a productivity tool that improves CAD or data visualizations. So obviously we wanted to go after gaming. This is one of the core problems that I suffer all the time in my living room is, like, how do I have a multiplayer experience? So in my living room, I've got 2 televisions, 2 Xboxes, 2 PlayStations, 2 Switches. I probably have $5,000 worth of equipment to have a broken-ass 2-player experience. So, and if you want to do any of these games where you need private information, you have to do ridiculous stuff like this. I have to admit, I never did this myself, but I'm very much tempted to do it. VR's cool. I love VR. Back at Valve, there was like a moment where we're like, well, you know, VR has too much friction for end users. We shouldn't do it. And I was like, no, there's something here in VR. We should keep researching it. But it does miss like that core mission, like bringing people together in the living room to collaborate and to have this communal experience. You know, you can kind of do it, but you're very disconnected from folks. So that's where Till 5 comes in. So, you know, through some clever optics, we can make a headset super lightweight, allows any number of players to sit around a table, share this volume of 3D space that can be symmetrical for each player. So, like, if you're sitting around playing just something simple like a board game, you know, I can point in at like a checker piece, and my friend sitting across the table will see me pointing to that exact same checker piece. But maybe we're going to do D&D. So we have the dungeon master that prepares a map on like one of our tools, like Battle Map Studio, puts all the monsters and traps and stuff in there. So that person is privy to where all the baddies are, and then all the other players have their own visibility into the space. Maybe they don't have enough, I'm not a D&D player, so if I can get this wrong, forgive me, but they don't have enough awareness of where the poison gases or the traps are. And others can, and allows you to have these asymmetrical experiences. And then for me, I'm just a pure like action shoot 'em up type player. So you do things like you can have a shared like shooter where you're running around the map all together in the same like shared space, or you can do asymmetrical. You might be doing a strategy type game where there's a fog of war. You're moving your units around, preparing for the big battle, and it's private to you. And then all of a sudden, it's revealed to everyone, and the battle begins. What's interesting, as you start to play games like this, even the simplest games, and LBE again, there's so many, parallels that I love. The simplest things, when you throw a few people around the table, become heightened when you can look across the table, see each other's eyes. You can be looking at their posture, what they're doing with their magic wand as far as like they're moving around. Are they trying to fake me out by just moving the wand, or are they actually coming in to attack me? Takes a simple game, makes it 10 times better. So yeah, and one of the important things, I threw the slide in here, it's important to be able to see your beer, and see your friends, and your snacks, but it's as well important that you can connect to your friends that can't join you in your living room. So a core part of our system is that you can connect to your friends if they can't be there. So you want to play a game of Settlers Catan, you just call them up, boom, 30 seconds, you're in. Your friends from all over the world pop in, you play the game, hit save, boom. It just takes all this friction out of playing these kind of social games, even over distance. There's some really cool features that we added to the system, and we're getting very close to releasing these driver features, things where you can track physical objects and combine it into the world. So tracking your hands, so you can reach in and, if you're just doing a playful like sandbox experience, you can just be shoving clay around or like poking at things. Or you can use physical objects. You can actually put your miniatures in there and wrap them with graphics and track their position. In fact, you don't even have to track them. You can just have the Tilt 5 system create this beautiful holographic landscape and just drop in your miniatures and move them manually. Or have playing cards that you drop on the table, which are triggers for events in the game. So that's going to bring a really interesting dynamic that's never been seen in the living room, so that you can have this true blend of real world and virtual worlds coming together. And what's great is through COVID and all of that, we're now shipping, which was quite a challenge. You guys might be interested, since you're in Silicon Valley here, about what it's like running a startup right in the middle of COVID hitting. So after we bootstrapped the company, we did a Kickstarter campaign. This was urged by investors we were talking to. They're like, we want to see that like people in the world want this thing. Like, you tell us it's going to be great. It looks fun. I had fun for 5 minutes, but will real customers buy it? We did a Kickstarter campaign. We were the largest ever AR project on Kickstarter. It was amazing. We did it with a marketing budget that you couldn't even buy a used car with. It was in the history of our funding in our company. It was, again, another one of these all chips on the table. We took everything in the bank, put it, this is our marketing budget, let's go. But it was successful. And then from that, we quickly raised a Series A funding round. And there was a lot of excitement. We raised some money, and then COVID hit. And thank goodness, like, we were right in this window where we could raise some money. So now we were trying to go into production just before COVID hit. Now we can't travel to China. So how do we do that? We actually had to invent our own machines that could do all of the inspections remotely, so we could log into them and see what's happening. Far more than we would have done if we could have just flown over there and sat with the operators and then monitored what they were doing and got them up to speed. So, that was interesting. It took us, probably a full year building like this dozen fixtures to send over to the factory. We sent 3 copies of them over there. Still, what's interesting is we did like trial run after trial run, and like the silliest things would happen. Like, we have these precision lenses on the cameras and stuff, and they would put their thumbs, greasy fingers, on the lenses, and we have all these failures. Or, they were, someone combined sweep a bunch of dirt and get inside the projectors, and we had to do quite a few trial runs to get the quality up. And happy to say, as of about a month and a half ago, the quality's up to the point where we don't have to do any inspections anymore. that build the units. They go to a logistics company and go out to our customers. So this is what the system looks like. You get a game board. So the game board is an active part of the system. It's actually passive to be technically correct, but it's optically active in it. So this game board has a special property that allows any light that strikes it to come back to each user. It's called retroreflection. I'll explain that in a minute. Then we have these glasses. They're super lightweight, 110-degree field of view. You can draw black, super easy to use. You don't have to ratchet them to your head. You don't have to worry about doing any kind of adjustments. They have like the biggest eye box on the planet for an AR/VR system. So if you're a child, you want to wear them, that's not a problem. If your eyes are narrow set or wide set, our eye box is basically this entire giant set of lenses in front. It has all those cameras and sensors to track, objects, and the magic wand. Then we have the magic wand, which is, everyone teases us relentlessly that it looks like a barbecue lighter. And yeah, we did not want it to look like a barbecue lighter. We went through hundreds of iterations. We tried and tried to make it not look like a barbecue lighter, but we tried things like you see in Oculus and the HTC where there's these big things out in front, but that gets in front of your experience. So you don't want that in your direct line of sight when you're doing AR, so we had to take a different approach. And what we found after doing all this testing is it's very intuitive for people to poke something with a stick. We've been doing that ever since we were 4 years old, playing out in the mud. And even people that have never played a game before, you tell them poke the game character, pull the trigger, and move it around. They can do it instantly. It goes back to the one-button experiences we had to do. So actually the wand turned out, in the end, although we wanted it to be sexier and look different, it really works with the end user. Here's some of the features on it. Speakers and microphone in there, so you can talk to your friends when you connect to their game boards. It runs on USB, so you plug it into your PC or your Android phone. We're about ready to release our Android drivers. We have some iOS adapters coming, so you can use your iOS device. Because we're using generic USB, that means that we can run multiple devices off of one PC, and that has a lot of really great virtues, especially if you're a developer or you want to spectate. I'll get into that in a bit. So this is how the retroreflector works. This little animation shows these little microspheres that are built into the game board. So the light is actually emitted from the game board, or from the headset itself, and travels all the way to the game board and back again. It kind of seems silly when you hear it the first time, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just put it directly into your eyes? Well, there's a lot of people working on trying to make AR to put light directly in your eyes. It's an immensely difficult problem. It's probably a decade away before someone can compete with us as far as field of view and contrast and actually generating a light field so that you can do vergence accommodation properly. So I feel like we played a colossal prank on the entire industry. While they were off this direction, we were off doing this. So we take another look at the retroreflector a little bit closer. Sometimes people are confused, well, you can only have one person around the table. No, because the light goes directly back to each user. You can be anywhere around the table and have your own private display. So user 3's light's coming in, it bounces and goes back to them. User 2, user whatever. Yeah, go ahead.
What's the range that it would work at? If I had that material on the back wall there, would it still work?
Yeah, I mean, that distance is easy. So we've tuned our projectors to work within, a range that's 0.25 meters from the tip of your nose to a couple meters out. If you wanted to do another type of experience, you have to tune the projectors to be kind of within that depth of field that you want. We're optimized for this kind of out-of-box experience. You flip the game board open on your table, slip on the glasses and go. So in the early days, we're not really worried about everyone asks us yeah, could you put it on every wall in a space and make a holodeck? And well, technically yes, but that's not what we're going for right now. We're in the living room, on your desk at work, those kinds of things.
But it's not inconceivable that you'll do that someday, right?
There's actually a group called Theatrics that's taking our existing product and just doing it on their own. So they made a geodesic dome out of these fiberglass like pieces, and they put this reflector inside. So it's like cool.
And you can get higher gain materials than maybe what you're shipping to consumers if someone wanted to actually make
Right.
professional.
Right, the higher gain material, actually, if we use the higher quality material like this close, it's too bright. It hurts your eyes. So we actually chose this for the properties of like close, within arm's reach. And that's the magic.
Okay.
When you start doing experiences within arm's reach, and there's a simulated light field in front of you, it's very comfortable. When you do things off at an infinity, like with a VR system, and you start bringing objects up close, you start having a lot of eye strain because emergence accommodation's broken at that point. Oh yes, go ahead.
Just in terms of speaking about arm's reach, you mentioned the items being mapped in the future. Does that mean that there would be hand tracking directly on the device coming in as well for all of that?
Yeah, if you
Okay.
go to our website, you can see what we call Proto 2 hardware, which
Love
is
it,
a little
okay.
bit architecturally different. We were doing hand tracking. I actually had Gabe Newell out a few months ago and let him try the hand tracking. He's like, oh my God, this is what you talked about all those years ago. Like, it has this real presence. First time in AR I've had that. I'm like, yeah, because you can focus on your hand, you can focus on the virtual sand that we were pushing around.
I love that, yeah.
Yeah, it's neat. It feels really good. We have another like simple tech demo. You poke a robot and
Okay.
it like jumps back, and then you can shove it on the side and stuff. It's the early days on all of the physical object tracking. I'm excited for when developers, kind of scrappy developers get playing with that, and they're going to discover play mechanics that we've never even thought about. It's like we were talking to a developer recently. They're just desperate to get our camera output so they can do this tracking. They're like, yeah, I want to do something where you scrape your hands on the game board so you have a tactile feel and you're kind of dragging yourself through the scene. The material is super robust so you can touch it. So, actually having hand tracking plus a tactile feedback has a big impact, and especially when you can focus on your hands and the virtual objects.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when you look at something like a HoloLens, they're fixed focus off at a distance, and so when you try to bring something up close, it feels a little awkward to you. And there's a lot of AR systems out like that. So it's going to take a long time to have a near-eye display that can do this kind of experience. So we just put a camera through the lens, and this rainbowy stuff is just the way our display works. It flashes red, green, and blue. But you can see, like, this is a dice, and then there's some little meeples back there, and as you focus back and forth, these virtual objects go in and out of focus. Kind of the holy grail for AR to be able to do that. It's just a chart. Well, I guess shouldn't diss on your competition, but yeah, we diss on our competition all the time. It's like, I want to get on the phone with Zuck, like, varifocal's difficult. Yeah, we're shipping. But yeah, cost, comfort, content, like we have a full developer program, so we're bringing in all kinds of content, working with third-party developers to bring game content to the system. Immersion's important. The immersion's important, but also being grounded in the real world is important for this type of experience. Knowing where the AR experience is helpful for the end user. You probably noticed in location-based experiences, like when a game developer has a monster dropping out of the ceiling, it's disorienting. We actually find that, having an expected space where you're doing the magic, is very helpful. To get a little more technical, I've heard folks wanted to hear how it works. We actually, in the headset, we have a processor. We call it the reprojection engine, and this is an important part of our system. So the reprojection engine, what it does is it takes asynchronous frames from the game. So your game can run at any frame rate, basically, and then we upscale it to 180 frames per second. And then there's this feedback loop. We have a high-speed tracking system in the headset that adjusts, it's 1,000 hertz update rate going into this filter, and it's constantly adjusting the image on the table. So as you move around, even if your frame drops to 30 frames per second, you're still going to have a buttery smooth experience on the table. And that allows us to run on any old generic Android phone that has USB. It allows us to plug in multiple headsets into one PC and run out of one game. Allows us to spectate solo games, which I think that's probably first time in the industry that anyone can just plug in multiple headsets and play a solo game.
Yeah.
Or watch a solo game, and we're adding some features in there where we can pass control to each of the various players. So like, I'm gonna play the first level, and oh, I failed it, and your buddy says like, oh, pass it to me. It's like, boop, now you can do it, and you can all spectate. While we're talking about spectating, we struck a deal with Mixcast, so they do compositing, so you can add a little SDK to your game, and then you have an external webcam that can be off to the side. It allows you to composite the experience and then stream it out to a television if you just want to have people without headsets spectating. But it also allows you to go to Twitch and YouTube, and that's going to be, really great for sharing the experience. The price point, $359. It's if you look at all of the stuff that we put in this, all the lenses and stuff, it's really amazing. We got it at $359. It's right in that sweet spot. It's just almost a no-brainer for families. Oh, and here, like this is the factory. This is I talked about these robotic fixtures and stuff. So there's a dozen different like fixtures that we had to create just out of the blue because we couldn't go to China. But it's been really fun. We get to monitor as they're building, and so it's like we kind of are obsessed at night as they're doing a production run. We're like, oh, we saw 3 in a row that had the same failure. Like, get them on the phone, call them up, like, hey, stop. Why do we have 3 cameras that are out of focus in a row? Like, open those up, and it's like, oh yeah, we just had lunch and greasy pizza fingers. So yeah, we're super proud of our developer tools. So you can get those. Every kit is a dev kit. So you buy a retail unit. You can also use as a developer kit. This is my weekend obsession. I love tinkering with our system. I'm not a programmer at all. I'm mostly a chip designer. So I can barely like write a couple lines of code. It's very accessible. And we've added some features to the system that makes it very efficient for developers. So, a lot of you have developed for VR where you have to deploy out to the VR system, put it on, look at it like, oh, everything's wrong, I gotta go back to Unity and I gotta like tweak on it, and then you deploy again, it's like, it's still wrong. And that's really time consuming doing that over and over again. Even with VR systems that you can do real time, you pop them up and down, it's a pain. With our system, we have real-time editing in Unity and Unreal, so you can move game objects and see it happen in real time on your game board sitting right next to you. So you can adjust lighting, you can move objects around. You can have people play testing and like, here, let me just move that little, wall piece so you can move through there. Our developers really like it. So you can just, the way you do it is you just go to our website. You don't even have to have a headset. You can go download the SDK and drivers and everything today and start playing with it, make your game, and you can send it to me and I'll try it. And so it's all available. We don't charge for that. And so it looks something like this. You just import it into Unity, you bring in a custom package. Then we have prototypes for various things you want to do. So you just drag and drop it. So as we work with developers, especially developers that have taken their games and gone to VR, they try to call bullshit on us. They say like, oh, it can't be as easy as you say. And it's like, oh, well, I bet you anything that it'll take longer to load your project than for me to get it rendering on the table. So you drag your prototype over, boom. Now you see a game board here, and hit play, it's going to render right at that moment. And then there's all kinds of sliders and stuff that you can move around. You can scale the world. You know exactly where the objects are going to be. We put little shortcuts all through the design, through the SDK to make it easy, so you can just drag and drop stuff onto wands and different grip points and different input schemes. And we have some fun world scales that you can choose from, like megabeard seconds and furlongs. So, whatever world space you want to work in. It's as we've been working, we have probably 20 games or so on our website now. We have probably another 50 in works. Folks are saying like, wow, this is really, it makes our games more fun in some ways, right? Some of these existing games, and that really feels good. Like the first time a developer sits around the table and they take their action shooter and they play it with their whole team, it's pretty amazing to see that. Now talking about a team, we did this all with, primarily our company was about 5 people for the longest time. We almost got fully to production on 5 people. Now we're only 24 people. So we built this all on like a skeleton crew. But I really adore these folks. Whenever we go to trade shows, we don't have like marketing people that just go. We actually take engineers out and we let them circulate with folks. And I like to say we have a high immune factor to assholes. So, you know, if you're kind of a jerk, you're out, and if you're like really cool and into the space, you're golden. So if you ever get a chance to run into the Tilt 5 team, don't be afraid to go talk to them. They're probably technical, and they're probably the nicest people around you'll ever meet. Yeah, I talked about games. There's some interesting ones here that bring a lot to the experience. I want to mention like Tabletopia. And, you know, people obviously look at our system and say like, yeah, board games. So we just released Tabletopia. It has 150 board games. And it's all multiplayer, and it's cross-platform as well. So if your friends don't have their Tilt 5 yet, they can just log in with their PC or tablet and play with you, and you get to have all the fun on the Tilt 5 system. We've been looking for quite a few platforms that bring a lot of experiences. Another one that I really like a lot, which delivers on this bringing the whole family together, is Figment XR. So Figment XR has Tilt Brush built into it. You can import 3D models from like Sketchfab and places. Then you can add physics to it and simple game logic. It's basically kind of a no-code kind of experience. And you can, you know, even a non-gaming person can get in there and like drag animated GIFs of parts to the grandkids, or get in there and make a little racetrack and have marbles roll down it. And it's been really amazing as we play test that with just people of all different experiences in gaming. And then, I mean, I've been addicted to Battle Planet. That's one of my recent addictions. It's a twin-stick shooter. You hold our game controller sideways, so you don't use it like a magic wand, so you use the buttons, and you have to defend your planet. There's missiles that fly in. You have to defuse bombs. They're, as soon as we release the multi-headset drivers, they're going to make it local multiplayer off one instance of Unity, and I'm super anxious for that one. And then there's been a lot of surprising things out there. So we've just been shipping hundreds and hundreds of developer kits. Like someone calls us up and like, hey, I got $359. Well, I shouldn't say developer kits because they're all developer kits. So someone calls us up and like, I'm a developer. We're like, great, you get one. We get it in the mail as fast as we can if they just like prove to us they're a developer. We don't ask too many questions if it's non-gaming. Like we're just trying to stay focused on games. So these have been going on out to universities and places, and there's a couple groups that just surprised us out of the blue. There was like Nucleus VR that called us up the other day like, well, we're training astronauts with Tilt 5 now. So we put astronauts in a VR headset. They're walking through a warehouse through a life-size version of the International Space Station. The instructors sit around the Tilt 5 like, and use the wand like a hand of God and talk to the astronauts and say like, all right, go to that control panel, and there's like a laser pointer or something that shows up. Like a week ago, we had like a group reach out to us like, yeah, we're working with the Children's Texas Hospital. We've developed a game that will encourage kids or help kids heal faster through games. And like, wow, that's really cool. We didn't even expect that. There's Bad VR's doing data visualization. Recently, Arcturus reached out to us. They do basically video editing for volumetric capture, and they can do AI rigging of real humanoids and have them like spin around and look at you. So like they use Tilt 5 now. They're like, we stopped using VR because it's just so much more convenient for us to like show clients on Tilt 5 because we can all sit around and, you know, we just have the character look up at them like a little Princess Leia. So yeah, order your kit, order your kit, order your kit. As far as manufacturing goes, sometime around September we should be caught up. We're really backlogged right now. Every time we do events, the backlog gets a little bit further. We've impressed some of the harshest critics out there, or the biggest critics. Like I was really scared when Carl Guttag, maybe some of you have heard of Carl Guttag. He we were at AWE and I saw him in the line and I'm like, oh no, there's Carl Guttag, like he hates everything. He's not gonna understand the trade-offs that we made on this. So I intercepted him in the line, I'm like, hey Carl, and he's like got this posture of like, you know, I'm not having any of your like BS. And so I followed him through, and then he puts the glasses on and tries to, he's like, oh, I thought it was gonna suck. And then, literally, that's what he said. And then he, you know, I'm explaining like, you know, the varifocal stuff or the light field stuff, and he's like, wait. It's like, why is this working? And he spent like 30 minutes, and then he went home. He came back the next day. He's like, I ordered one, and I brought some optical gear with me. We're testing this. And he got back in line, and he's like, how is this working? I'm gonna have to dismantle this thing. And I'm like, don't, I'll just send you one dismantled hand one. So I guess with that, there's a QR code. You can get in line for one. As one of my mentors told me, you know, now that you're the CEO stands for Cash Extraction Officer. So you have to keep promoting at all times if you want to get a startup off the ground. So yeah, that's great. Any questions?
Jerry, I do have a question from Olivier JT of Synthesis Universe fame. He wants to know if you take the board and fold it on its fold, can you have height as well as?
Our premium kit, this 359 kit,
Yeah.
has a configurable board that can tip up.
Well,
So,
there you go.
you know, what's interesting, I just use the flat board myself. We have a small board, and then we have a big board for like if you want to do Warhammer or something on it.
We do.
You
Yes.
you know, there's
Like that.
enough vertical height out of all the graphics for me on just a flat board. So a lot of times people are like, well, you can't have any vertical height, and that's not true at all because you have this big volume in front of you, and the board's pretty big. I have a kit here, we'll fire it up. So, you know, if you keep stuff in the first like 2/3 of the board, you just have tons of space, and if you keep stuff in the first half, you can bring it right to the tip of your nose. You can have anything within that space. But yeah, we do the deluxe kit. You can flip it up, and then you have like this infinite view that you can go out into the distance with it. You know, now that we're shipping these worldwide, we're learning a bunch. So, you know, we had a bunch of backers in Japan, and so now the kits are showing up there, and we're starting to get feedback like, you're about 5% too big even on the small board for our homes. And like, interesting, I hadn't thought about that. And so I think there's going to be a future for us where we're making all kinds of crazy boards to accommodate, you know, people's needs. I think.
Any chance Vimeo can get on Tilt 5?
Oh, so
Will that be
we would
possible?
like that, and some of our marketing people have been.
What was the question?
Can Demio be on Tilt 5?
Yeah.
So our marketing folks have been doing guerrilla warfare, trying to convince them of this. So if you want to see Demio on there, go tweet to them and say, like, this would be perfect on Tilt 5. And Stephanie on our marketing side would probably adore you. I think it'd be perfect. Like, Demio, it's a great game, but like when you sit around the table, you kind of want to see your beer, you want to see your friends, and it's frankly just going to play better on our system.
And they got Asmodee, which
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah. I can't tell you what games, but you know, we've been working with a ton of third-party developers, but we're also licensing some content now. And so we're doing that so that we can have tighter control. We're working with the external third-party studios so that we can get all the features we want in. When you work with third-party developers, they do what they want mostly, but there's just so much more we can do. So these Asmodee games, I think, are going to be pretty hot. Yeah, there's just so much.
You guys don't know they make Gloomhaven. You know, Gloomhaven, it's a great board.
It's a very good board game. Yeah.
If I wanted to buy the microsphere material, is that something that's like just accessible on AliExpress or something?
Yeah,
Or do
you
you
just
sell
go
it?
to Alibaba. The problem is you have to buy it like 100 meters at a time or something, but it's cheap.
You can get smart quantities on Amazon.
Oh, you found it?
Yeah.
You can buy like a coat that has it, right?
We did that.
Yeah.
Our office manager used to be a ballerina, you know, very slender and everything, so she had an outfit made with retroreflector, and we shined it at her, and it was creepy. You look right through her.
The registration dots aren't they're required for maybe syncing, but you don't need it to just be.
Yeah, the dots around the board, that identifies which type of board, and then we look at those dots and the edges of the board to do sub-millimeter accuracy. And that's important for having group experiences. Like if anyone's tried to do slam and tried to coordinate like multiple players and have everything spatially locked, it's very difficult because my origin point for slam might be over here, yours might be a foot over here, and so the dots are important. Like when we did the dress thing, we just had the game board in front, and then she just walked in front of it.
Okay.
Creepy. I don't recommend it. Yes.
So obviously the projector is tuned to like work with retroreflection material, but if you have like little like blank characters that you put down on the board, are the projectors strong enough to like, I don't know, make like if you're tracking it, make like one character's shirt green and then make another one.
And you put retroreflective material on it. So some of the experiments we tried, and I can't wait until developers start playing with this, is we took playing cards and we just put a little panel, and then we had an April tag or something on there so we can get a pose off of it. So you hold the card up, now there's a little princess or a little character standing in your card. The other thing that's kind of cool when you do things like that, it's like a magic window. Like if you're not even like presenting a game character there, it's like you're just looking through it. So I didn't bring a spare piece, I regret that now, but you can, basically we just render everything in front of you, and it's intentionally bigger than the game board. So if you just lay a piece of retroreflector or another piece of game board over here, now your experience is bigger, and you lay a piece over here is bigger, or you put it over here. We actually did some experiments where we had tile systems that we had little markers on them. And the game was you had a character and it would run down these tiles, and these different tiles had different properties to them. One of them, when you put it down, it had like a trap or something, so you had to like pull that up and put a different tile down. Very simple prototype, but it's like, yeah, there's some potential of doing some interesting things with just pieces of retroreflector. We also did another one where we had a tracking marker inside of a children's book, and it was just faked up stuff. But you flip through, and there's some pages that are text, and our projectors aren't bright enough to illuminate the pages because they're only 0.65 lumens. But then you flip open the next page, and there's a marker there, and then there's a character standing on this panel of retroreflector in there. So, you know, people that want to go crazy, they can do some interesting stuff. Our main focus, only being like 24 people, is we need to stay focused on like how can we move a lot of units to like, you know, homes over the long run, and then as we get bigger, we can start expanding into more of these crazier type experiences, or more experimental, I should say.
OJT on YouTube would like to know Steam Deck Intel 5.
Oh,
In the works?
One of our developers spoiled it for us. I reached out to the Valve guys, like, give me a Steam Deck, and they sent me an EVT unit over, and we got it running natively on, you know, root on Linux. And we're like, yeah. And then we tried to run it in their emulation layer, like, oh shoot, like there's this bootstrapping of the glasses, some firmware gets squirted up to the glasses, and like you can't run a service in the background. And we're like, well, okay, we're gonna have to have like a special app that gets the glasses started, and then you can run stuff. But our developer just formatted their Steam Deck, put Windows on it, and they're like, haha, till 5 on Steam Deck. And you're like, oh, you spoiled our marketing opportunity. But no, yeah, you can. The Steam Deck's awesome. So, you know, kudos to the Valve team for like making a really hot little handheld device.
I have mine with me if people want to play with it. So.
So can you take it outside? Is there anything with the reflective? I mean, is there anything different about, because of the, you know, you have so many light conditions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think outside's going to be a good place for you. First of all, you probably aren't going to walk down the road holding a game board, so yeah.
No, I mean, it's sitting outside.
Yeah, you probably want to be in the shade. You know, the sun is, you know, we work in like normal lighting, trade show lighting is fine for us, but the sun's probably like 100 times more than that. So you can do it at night. A cool thing about our system is you don't need light in the room to run. So, you know, gamers play in the dark. So we have infrared illuminators, you know, as part of our tracking system for tracking objects as well as tracking the game board. So we illuminate in front of you with infrared light, so you can have complete darkness, or you can even have sun pouring in the window, and it's all fine. Yes?
I noticed in a couple of the slides that the headset has a mic built in, and that kind of raised the question for me, like the game board obviously has the markers so that you can triangulate and figure out where the board is, but does that work in reverse? Like, can you triangulate where the players are around the board? It's like, I'm thinking, what if I'm playing online and like, let's say I'm playing against Kome, and Kome's not here, but I want to hear his voice coming from like his pieces.
Oh
Can you do
yeah,
that?
well we have a head transform. We know where your head is, and we know where north is on the board, so you know where the user's head is. We've done a lot of multiplayer stuff, and there's like some interesting stuff. So when you have multiplayer and you have people sitting across from you, and you have some kind of object that they're moving, like you have a representation of their wand and you're talking to them, it's like you kind of forget that they're not really sitting across from you. The weird things come where you're both oriented north, then all of a sudden a hand comes out of the middle of you, and so there might have to be like, I don't know, you know, the developers are going to have to think about like how to solve that if that's unappealing to have a random wand in hand like pop out of your space. But it is really neat. So as far as networking, a lot of people are like, oh, it must be hard to do networking. And it's like, Till5 doesn't touch networking at all. So if your game's networked, it just works automatically. And if it's already networked, it's already crossplay. So that's really cool. A lot of our games that are networked, you can already play crossplay on them. So that's a good thing for us, chicken and egg, because you know we're building these as fast as we can, but there's not a critical mass out there like a lot of other game systems. So, you know, in the early days, you might be playing, you know, some of these games crossplay. And in fact, one of our board members came out, and he was playing. I don't know, we have this 3D space one. I was forgetting the name of it. You fly through space, so you don't have to do like things flat on the table. This one actually, you kind of look out into the universe and you're flying the ship, and it's all online. So he's out there playing, and there's like names above all the others, and he was just like blown away. I'm like, yeah, those are just randos on the internet griefing you right now. So it's pretty cool. And then I'm excited just from a development standpoint, being able to run multiple headsets from one instance of Unity. That just makes it a lot easier. Networking is always a pain, at least for me, because I'm a total noob. You can also, our next release of the driver that's hopefully going out Monday will allow you to launch multiple instances of the same, or any application on the PC, and then our control panel will just grab a pair of glasses plugged in and assign it to a game. So you could do networking, or you could even be playing totally different games. That's always kind of fun, like when we're at trade shows or we're demoing the office and we have a big group come through. You know, we can have like 5 people around the table, and this person's playing a Marble Madness clone, this one's playing a shooter, this one's trying out a board game, and everyone just kind of looks like crazy because their wands are like going all over, and someone's screaming because something's, you know, happened to them in their action shooter.
Would it be possible, for example, for VR games that have Live or Mixcast SDK in it with that camera, would it be possible for someone using Till5 to spectate that player's gameplay from that angle in VR? Kind of like how people stream Beat Saber on Twitch with mixed reality. Would it be possible to do kind of like that with Till5? Like I'm looking on the board and watching you play Beat Saber from whatever angle it is.
That's a great question. I don't know. I've been out of the loop besides just dropping the Mixcast SDK in and trying it on my own stuff. It may already do it. There's like they were able to stand this up in a couple months because it was very similar to VR, and so we were surprised. They're just like, there it is, and they're like, yeah, it's awesome. I use it all the time now. It's like, you know, sometimes it's more convenient to look over the composited video, you know, what's going on.
Does the whole sorry.
That's okay.
Does the whole system work offline? So like if you're playing solo on, I don't know, a plane.
Yeah, yeah. There's no requirements to
Do
be
you need
on.
a plain tray table size?
All right, I'll send it to the marketing people. We have another board option.
Or have them coat the tray tables with that surface and sell the headsets to the planes.
Oh, JetBlue, I need to go talk to them. Keep selling. We did take it on the Jonathan Colton cruise, a cruise boat. That was interesting. So we ran a.
Or the acceleration issues.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The first night we had scheduled like this 5-person, like 3-hour D&D session, but we were going through this really choppy water. So the game board virtual image would like move like a foot in the air and then move down, and we're like, not tonight. We came back like a night or two later, it was fine, but maybe on an airplane on ascending and descending, you might not like the experience. But you know, it's solvable. Somehow they got HoloLens up on the International Space Station. So one of the things we're joking about, and maybe we'll just do this, is our wand has an accelerometer. It's just like, well, let's just put a spare wand on the table in these situations and then just subtract out the motion. But you know, it's cruise boats is a pretty niche space for us.
She's laughing because we just took an international trip, so we had to pick a couple international flights. I'm wearing my Quest 2 on the plane, and I'm bitching and moaning because the pilot won't keep the plane level, so my stuff's just walking away from me and everywhere, and to the point that I just finally took the headset off. But,
yeah, we're not alone in that.
I am used.
But I think it's solvable, actually. You know, we were talking about it, but you know, our little 24-person team is not going to prioritize.
Motion platforms generally use a fixed object on the platform to subtract the motion data from the IMU data.
Yeah.
So you mentioned it had varifocal, like, I guess things are in focus. You can look at your hand in front of you and then things behind get out of focus. Is that how it's being rendered on your system? I haven't tried it yet,
Yeah.
so I can't tell. But
so what's cool about our optical system is we approximate a light field, and this came actually a little bit later in the development. We started looking at ray tracing, how the light goes through our system. Basically, the projectors are lined up geometrically so that as if you're projecting in the center of your eye. And so by setting an aperture and a secondary lens correctly, the rays diverge at the right rate, and because of the gain of the retroreflector, it comes back approximately in the correct location. So if there was a real-world object that's scattering light from the room, it comes towards you in the same, you know, kind of fan out of rays, and we can mimic that just by tuning our optical system. I'll set it up. You'll have to try. Like, there's some really good demos I have here where there's like tree branches and stuff. You just focus past them, and once we figured out we could do that tuning to it, we're like, oh my goodness, it makes it even better.
so in the rendering, are you ray tracing?
No, we don't have to, because it's such a small volume and it's close enough.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, everything is in real world units in the game, and you know, you're playing with the system seated, and so in generally there's this distance that's uniform away from you that just makes it work.
So it's all in focus in the camera, the Unity camera that's seeing it, but because you're actually just seeing it with your eyes, rather than having a lens go like do it, it just works.
There was way back in ancient times, they used to think that light was emitted from your eyes, is how you see, and that's kind of what we're doing. It's like we line it up with your eyes, and then the projectors are so close, it's as if it's going right through the lens of your eye, which allows us to tune the lenses in the projector to mimic what your eye is doing.
The reason I asked is there's some really interesting stuff going on with like volumetric representations, like neurovolumetric stuff. This might fit really well with that, like viewing nerves in this might just be really nice.
Yeah, there's some exciting research on light field displays. I forget the name of the company. I think they're in Europe. They're actually making super narrow field of view, but they're making light field displays. And they started off trying to make it work for VR and AR, but they just couldn't make it compact enough. But their business, where they're making all the money right now, is replacement for those things in an optometrist where they flip lenses in front of you. So instead, you know, it's ideal. Like, they can put some virtual object at a known focal depth, and like, is it in focus yet? And they can tweak it back and forth, and they can figure out, you know, what diopters your lenses need to be without flipping things in and real lenses out in front of you. But that stuff is, like, we tried at Valve. Like, we spent ungodly amounts of money to try to solve some of these things, and there's the laws of physics that are really in our way of being able to make a headset that just puts light directly in your eyes, you know, does proper occlusion of the transmissive light coming through. Really hard. Like you have to understand all the light rays coming at you, and you have to have a magic material that can block this light ray, but not that light ray. I can't see like finding a solution for that for quite some time. Give me a refrigerator size thing, I could do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
On the last thing you mentioned about all the features, like it's pretty incredible what you've done. Like I'm blown away. You could do this for like $350. The beam splitters and the 2 projectors and everything. When did you lock down that price? When did you realize that we could actually have all these features and we could, sell it for $350? Was that a year ago, 2 years ago? Just curious what that process was from when you're happy enough saying we got a thing now. Let's.
It was pretty simple for us. So when we started Till 5, we'd gone through this trauma at the previous startup where the cost of our device ballooned up because our leadership didn't focus on doing one thing well. They wanted to boil the ocean. And we wanted to make some compromises. And so we're like, what's a comparable in the market that people are comfortable paying for? And we're like, Nintendo Switch. And like that's roughly the price that we want to sell it for. We need to be gross margin positive. Then we had to make the tough decisions like, okay, this goes overboard, but we can pull this other thing in that solves some other problem that's within arm's reach that amplifies like kind of the experience. And that's the agonizing part of product design is, and I worked in the toy industry and I worked with some really amazing mentors that, beat into my head, it's what you leave out of the product that's as important as what you put into it. But sometimes you just have to throw some stuff out that you really want in there.
Yeah, it's amazing what you've done. I met Carl and talked to him, and I see why he's impressed because there's so many little details that you guys got right. Like even today, I just noticed that you're actually not just projecting from the projector, you're actually projecting into the lens that I'm looking through. So it's, as you said, completely aligned with the eye. I was like, wow, that's a, detail you didn't have to do, but you've done it, and it adds so much more to it. And that's,
if we go back and look at the design, I'll tell you about, we did not want to have that tipped lens there. We hated it. Like, it makes the form factor a little bit bigger and dorkier looking. And our original design, the projection came up above the eyes, which works, but you don't get these like nice features. You get brighter image, higher contrast, and then you can tune the optics to look really great when it bounces off that lens. Now we almost couldn't do this lens either. These lenses have like 7 layers all stacked up. It was quite a manufacturing feat to get that to a price point that, first of all, it's plastic, because like one of our assumptions, like, all right, this is going to be in the living room. People are going to leave it on their couch. They're going to sit on it. So we got to take our lessons from the toy industry. We can't have glass here. So like, how do we make a lens that's flat enough that doesn't have field distortion? And so, I mean, that could have been fatal to us as far as a startup, but we had to figure out how to make an economical flat lens, And then, when you injection mold things, they never come out really flat. There's always soft curvatures in one way or another. So then it's like, that could have been fatal to us as a startup. It's like, how do we deal with these secondary distortions? So up in here is those projectors, which you got to see that passed around. Those have distortions in them, just due to like the field of view we're going for and manufacturing decentering of lenses. So we figured out how to take the distortion out of that. But now we go into weird compound bends due to the manufacturing process in this, and that was another big challenge for us. Is like we have 2 distortions compounding on top of each other. Like, how do we figure that out, and how do we make a machine that takes that distortion out of it? It's all fun though. I mean, I love it. Right? This is make really cool products. You have to like solve a couple dozen miracles each week.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I guess you have an eye because of your experience for what those issues would be, right?
I take people give me too much credit. I have an amazing team. Like, I'm the cash extraction officer now. So with all these smart programmers and optics people, I just walk in, and like mic drop things on them. Like, it's got to do this, and they're like, what? I actually learned from Gabe Newell from Valve. He always did this to us, and I'm starting to make the same. I don't know if they're mistakes, but you know, I hear like something's coming, and then I'll announce it to the world, and then you know, Gabe used to do that all the time, like, and then the engineers were like, I guess we're doing that for sure now. Just a couple weeks ago, I did an AMA, and I don't know, I'd heard in a hallway conversation like, oh, the Unreal plugin is ready to go. So I get in this AMA, I'm like, Unreal plugins, ready to go. And I never saw someone unmute so fast on Discord. Our project manager was listening in, and she's like, well, technically we have another 3 weeks, so.
Well, it's good when you have to make your CEO sign NDAs, right?
Yeah, it's good though. It's fun. Any other questions?
How did you decide to call the company Till 5?
Oh, we get asked that a lot. I can't tell you what Till 5 means because it's an inside joke between me and my co-founder. It makes us laugh. But this comes back to my previous startup, because when we had this string of like the professionals coming through, every time we got a new professional in, they're like, your name is not good. And so they would pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to these external firms to come up with new names. I never want to sit through one of those meetings again. They're horrible. If you've ever had to sit through them, it's like, we had names like, they always present them like this. There'll be a slide deck with 50 names, and they're just gibberish, most of them, and they're like, you know, Areno is the AR gaming system of the future. Areno. And then the next slide, Jillian. Jillian is the gaming. Guess what? We ended up with Jillian as one of our names. A Jillian ways to play. They thought it was brilliant. Then we ended up. But then that CEO was out, and a new CEO came in, and like, well, you know, we went down this path, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on Jillian. That's stupid. So we got to have another.
It's not
name.
his idea, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's like a, you know, names and packaging is like a honeypot for executives and mood boards.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it's like, we had this company come through to do a mood board for us. We already had the industrial design done. Like, there's no like turning back at this point. Gobs of money. They did this mood board for us, and you know, your design language is bubbles, and that was like it. And it was like this pamphlet, and I remember like being in the meeting, and as soon as the consultants left, I walked over to the garbage can and like, that's $70,000, we might as well just burned it in the garbage can. Yeah, another name that they came up with was Sightcast, and they had a whole branding thing around this. So Sightcast AR was going to be the full name, and they were going to abbreviate it SCAR. SCAR. And so they had all these renderings of like t-shirts with SCAR and the logos of SCAR, and the other things they were going to, you know, I've always been a big fan of first generation product. Just call first generation product like the name of your company or whatever at first. Just keep it simple, like don't add any more distractions. And so, but they didn't like that, and they're like, we have to have a name for the product itself. And so they're like, Voyage AR is what it's going to be called. And the whole reason for it. But when you read it, it spelled it Voyager. And so all of our graphic artists immediately, I mean, they just like lost it, like really? And then they started photoshopping like He-Man, you know, cartoons with Voyager and the Defender, and we actually lost our marketing person. He rage quit that week because no one liked it. These are all great lessons. I'm glad I went through it. I mean, it was painful at the time, but it taught me like stay focused, you know, focus on what's important. And we did obsess on the box a little bit, and you can see it back there.
I think that box is going to get a lot of attention.
So for the first 5,000 people that purchased the kit, we have a collectible box, and it's our love letter to gaming. So in the upper left is Till 5 is the ultimate gaming experience, of course, and then there's VR, and there's Pong machines, and there's Dance Dance Revolution. You go around the corner of the box, there's pinball, and you go down the back side of the box, there's, you know, ancient games, and like the first board game, and then you end on the end panel, which is like, you know, people sitting around a campfire back in prehistoric time, and that's like, why do we play games? It's about community and telling rich stories, and so it's neat. When we first saw the concept come back from the artist, who was actually one of our Kickstarter backers, which is awesome, my response was like, people are going to either love it or hate it, but it's going to be collectible. Yeah, so if you order today, you get more of a professional box that you could take into a boardroom. It looks nice, but it's not. It's not a love letter to gaming. And another, sorry, I'm just dissing on all our previous executives, but it's just hilarious.
It's good lessons learned.
Yeah.
Some of these people are going to do startups and fall into that same trap, so you might as well hear it.
You should do it too. It's easy peasy being a CEO, so don't ever be afraid of it like I was. So I came up with a logo for Sightcast AR. Yeah?
Oh, just on that, what you just said, it's easy peasy. What are some things you thought were going to be scary that like you found weren't in the job? Like why you didn't want to do it before, but you're now found that it's like it's better to be doing.
Yeah, I'll get to that. I'll tell this last like ragey story.
Oh no, tell all the stories.
So the logo came out, and it's like this kind of stylized S with like straight edges, and this is an all hands meeting, so everyone's there and they're presenting Voyagar and Sightcast AR and SCAR and our logo. And someone raised their hand, they're like, that's the Scopely logo. So we had to pay a bunch of money to have a new logo made. And we ran out of money. Who would have guessed?
Where did it go?
So when I started my first startup, finance, I'm not an MBA. I was super scared. I never raised money before. And I was like, oh, this is a whole new skill set I've never been exposed to, really. I mean, I ran computer stores. And it was weird because I've always been very brave in my career. Like, people are like, hey, build a flight computer for a rocket. I'm like, okay, I can do that. And you just figure it out on the fly. But I was too scared. And then when we started Till 5, I was like, okay, I need to surround myself with advisors. So something we never did at my previous startup. We never had an advisory board. So I went out and found all the smartest people I knew, put them on my advisory board, and I'm constantly calling them up like, I'm scared, my life savings is involved in this business, and I need to raise my first round of funding. What do I do? And they were there to be like, it's simple, and this is how you do a pitch deck. It's like engineering a circuit board. Like, just figure out the rules. There's a cadence to it. There's certain things that need to be in there. And that's what I found. Maybe that'll change, like when we're going public or something crazy in the future. But it's just like engineering. It's having confidence, having the right people around you that you can ask, and not being afraid to ask. And so far, it's worked out. It's hard work, though. I mean, you see the dark circles under my eyes. I've been going since 6 this morning, and but it's thrilling. It's thrilling. I haven't had this much fun since toy design. So when I did toy design, it's an intense business. You have 1 year to design a toy, and it's actually, after you design the last toy, usually you take a little bit of a break because you're burned out. So you have less than 1 year, and the toy executives approve your toy, and then you have 6 to 8 months to get this thing into production. So it's super intense, and if you don't get it done in time, like all the salespeople in the toy industry pre-sell the toys. They go to Toy Fair, you make them a prototype with a PC under the table with a hole drilled through, like with your wiggly, cat toy or something, and they sell it. And they're like, all right, we sold 250,000 of these things. You're in production by July, because we have to have it on the boat. It's got to be the logistics center, and it's got to be through all the certifications, store shelves by Thanksgiving, so it can sell for the holidays. And their reputation as a company is on the line. So as you start to slip your schedule, Eye of Sauron is coming in, looking at you like, you are getting this done, right? But it's thrilling, and it's like, what dirty little hack can I do to get this thing across the finish line so that we can produce this thing in July? It's fun, and that's startups too. Like, you never have enough money, right? You're always, the early days of Tilt 5, there were times we were 2 weeks away from like running out of money, and I'd go to our little skeleton team, I'm like, don't worry, I will get us the money. Come, hook or crook, I'm gonna find it. And you're just scared, right? It's just, you're dying inside, but you just have to have that confidence. You have to go out, you have to hustle. You know, and that was kind of one of the flaws of these like professionals that came in, is like, they'd come from big companies and they didn't really know the hustle you have to have in startups. You know, so there probably hasn't been a quarter I haven't raised money for the startup. And so I took that very serious when I was told, like, you have to work 120% of the time to make sure you're making sales and raising money.
Appreciate it.
Sorry, long-winded.
Oh, no.
So how many people pre-ordered a kit tonight?
Oh.
Not tonight,
Oh,
pre-order.
thank you.
Oh yeah, OJT back to NXE.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. You know, what's great about our system right now, it's like the early days of the, let's say, the DK1 or the HTC Vive. You know, every week there's a new little thing to try. So if you hate what's there now, just wait a week. There's another interesting thing around the corner. And if you're a tinkerer, it is super fun. You know, I barely know enough C# to do a transform, you know, apply transform to another game object. And, you know, I'll show you some of the demos. Some of those I just like prototyped, and then my software team's like, you're an idiot, Jerry, let me finish this for you. But it was like, oh, I got a game mechanic here, and there's something kind of interesting with it. And yeah, so even if you're a complete novice and never wrote a line of C# in your life, you can do it. So.
You mentioned a couple of your toys went viral. Like, would we know any of them?
Yeah. The first one that put me on the map, it was pretty interesting. Sorry, it's gonna be a long-winded story. So this toy company approached me. They had seen some work I'd done on reverse engineering 8-bit computers, and they're trying to make a video game joystick they could plug into the television to play all your favorite 1980s games. And they're like, we want to do the Commodore 64 first. And I'm like, yeah, that's great, that's awesome. Like, what does it take? They're like, well, our cost of goods has to be $5. And so we did, and this is 2003. And we've determined that there's no processor where we can do emulation, and we're not going to like port things over, you know, and half-ass it. We want it to be good. Can you make a custom ASIC for us? And up to this point, I had just like 4 years prior just forced my way into Silicon Valley as a non-college graduated engineer, and I tricked some companies to take a chance on me. So I told them with like full gusto, like, yeah, no problem, we'll have that done. And it's again that same cycle. Like, I had like less than a year to get this done, but I knew some people, so like, okay, do you guys want to do a project? You'll do the software, because there was some porting that needed to be done, so there's a loader and stuff, so we could fast load the games and stuff from an external ROM. I'll make an FPGA emulator, so an FPGA emulates an ASIC basically. It's just a big sea of gates that you can program. I'll work on that. You guys start writing the code, and I made them a little circuit board with all these chips on it and got it out to them right away. And then got the 6502 processor going, like, okay, now you have a 6502, you don't have any video, you don't have any sound, but start coding, because we don't have much time. Got like video going, got sound going, and the Commodore 64, turns out it's very quirky the way the programmers program these things. The 6502 processor has illegal opcodes in it. So there's like the legal ones that are documented, but these clever programmers found like, well, I'm just going to put a different byte in for the opcode, and it does interesting things that are helpful for my game. So I had this realization partway through that none of these games are going to run because I wasn't supporting illegal opcodes, so I had to figure out what are these quirky things going on with illegal opcodes, which delayed things. These poor programmers were 2 weeks from tape out. So tape out's when you like put the metal layers on the chip and you run them through the foundry and you get your chips out. They didn't even have color video at the time. I'm like, trust me, the colors are coming. Like, I just have to get these illegal opcodes working so the games will run. Trust me, the games will run. We got it done in time. Well, we were late, so we got it done. And the toy company's like, we're out of time to do any test chips, so we've already pre-sold, and this is, I said, $250,000. They sold $250,000 ahead of time of these things. So they're like, we're going to make $250,000 of these chips, and this is my first ever chip that I've done. And so they make $250,000 of these things, and they ship them over to China, and they bond them to the circuit board, and I get this angry phone call from this mad New Yorker, like, they don't fucking work. You're going to fucking destroy us. Like, you know, our reputation's on the line, you know, just, you fix this right now. And I'm like, trembling, like, oh, maybe I've just really put my foot in it this time, like, you know, maybe I shouldn't have had that bravado. They're like, get on a plane and get to China and fix it. What if the chip's dead? I'm not going to be able to fix it. I actually was kind of thinking, like, maybe I should run to Mexico and hide. I mean, I was scared, because these guys are intense. Like, so I didn't even have a valid passport at the time, so they're like, well, you're going to San Francisco and you're walking it one day through, and then you're getting on the first flight out. And like, as fast as I've ever like got a passport and then got out of the country. Took me to the factory, and fortunately they got one of the pilot run units and they opened it up for me, and I look at it and I'm like, what circuit board is that? That's not the circuit board that I sent you guys, you know, the design. And they're like, oh, well, we took your little emulator board and we removed all the capacitors off of it, and it didn't need them, it just ran. I'm like, well, that's like a 6-layer board with really good power supplies and stuff, and like, wait, speaking of power supplies, what kind of power supply is this? Where's the linear voltage regulator I put in there? Which I already felt dirty putting a linear voltage regulator in a battery operated toy. They're like, well, that was too expensive. So we figured out a way to do it with LED on the front panel and 2 transistors. Anyway, through the years I'd had some mentors in electronic space, these ham radio operators, and one of the first things they taught me when I was a little kid is like, when electronics isn't working, put your finger on it. It can inject noise, put capacitance on things. So I put my finger on it and it booted up, and I'm like, oh, thank God, thank God. So like, fix this mess, and you know, they fixed it and it worked, but I stayed over there while they did this quick layout and then validated that it worked, and they did a quick pilot run. And I'm sitting there at the end of the production line. I had one of these hooked to a television, and the programmers and I are all like fanatics of this old 8-bit computer. So they put extras in there. So they put some extra video games. There's one where you jump off a cliff and you dive backwards and you have to land and hit your heads against the rocks perfectly to split your head open. There was pictures of us in there drinking like beer with a famous programmer. And I dropped into this menu, and one of the toy guys was there. He's like, what is that? And I go, oh, we added a few things. And like, oh, this is bad. This is really bad. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I go home, and my answering machine, back when people had answering machines, was just full of this New Yorker, this New York guy yelling, like, we're going to lose our rating for children, and you're done in the industry. And I'm like, oh, okay. So anyway, I sit back licking my wounds, and I was dating this guy at the time. He's like, well, if you're done in the industry, well, they told me I couldn't tell anyone about it. And like, if you're done in the industry, why don't we just make a fake blog and pretend that it's a Chinese factory worker that likes to hack on toys? And this is back when Maker Faire was kind of a thing and getting going, and you know, toy hacking was a thing. I'm like, yeah, what the fuck, go ahead. And so he made this blog describing how to take the screws out of the thing and hook a disk drive up to it and download your own games, how to wiggle the joystick to drop into the secret menu. And I don't know, he had some kind of cloud at the time, and he got it on the front page of Slashdot. And so this is like a few days before the thing goes live, and they'd sold him to QVC, which was the Home Shopping Network, and very strange place to sell them. Anyway, things start going viral with it. People are talking about it, and I'm getting phone calls like, we're going to sue you over this. And I'm like, oh, I really put my foot in it now. I'm like, yikes. And so anyway, QVC launches it at midnight, and I didn't understand this about QVC. Those numbers on there are real when they go And then, so I tune in, and it is just going like crazy. Another thing about QVC is, like, I'm a toy company. I hire an actor to go in there and pitch the product, and we were the daily value. And so they had this actor in there, like, pitching it to grandmas and grandpas out there that know nothing about video games, and they didn't even know how to play the games, but they're trying to demonstrate it. They're like, look at these colors, your grandkids are gonna love it, and we're the daily value, you can get 2 of them. It's like the worst stuff, like promoting it, you know, and they only knew how to load the first game on it, and it was like the dumbest game ever. Anyway, it's going like crazy, and they had forgotten to take me off the email thread from, I was in a loop with QVC. So I'm seeing all this stuff go by, like, wow, sales are really up. Holy cow, this is crazy. Wait a minute, like 50% of the sales are going overseas. We're not broadcasting this product overseas. And then finally, they sold out. And then the toy executive called me like a month later or something. He's like, way to go, kiddo. And I went on to do another 5 designs with them. And but he reminds me, do not add things without permission. What's funny is they had to take some of the sketchier stuff out, and they re-released it into some other markets. And this is the silliest thing. They're like, okay, in the instruction manual, we want to understand how to wiggle the joystick to get into the secret menu. And I'm like, dude, that's not how secret Easter eggs work. Like, anyway, that one went viral. That one was pretty fun. New York Times, a reporter reached out to me, John Markoff. Julian, you know John. He's like, yeah, I want to come visit you, and I'm going to probably just write a little like column piece about your story. It sounds interesting. At the time, I was living in a rural area up in Oregon and just commuting to Silicon Valley. So I'm in this little farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, full of pinball machines and crazy test equipment. Looks like a sci-fi set when you walk inside. So he drives all the way out, and he's like, "This is really far out here." And, he's kind of like in Redneckville. And anyway, he talks to me, and he like stays a really long time. And he's asking me like racing, and computer stores, and breaking into Silicon Valley and stuff. So I had another commitment, so I'm flying on an airplane like weeks later, and I look over, and there's like a big picture of me, like a 2-page spread, toy with a story, and the guy sitting next to me, he's like, I'm like, can I see that? And anyway, it was a really neat article, very flattering. And anyway, I go do my work for like a week or so and come back home, and my answering machine comes back to the answering machine. It's full of messages from my father. He's like, the first message is like, are you okay? I don't know what's going on. People are calling me trying to reach you. And then the next message is like, okay, I interrogated one of them, and apparently there's a news article about you. And then he goes off and like goes down and gets the newspaper. He's like, oh wow, that's really cool, I had my father scared, but this is pre-social media days, and like I'd never really had much exposure online, and all these people were just trying to reach out to me, and they didn't know any way to get a hold of me, so they were looking my dad up in the phone book, which was creepy and flattering. Anyway, long story. Did a bunch of toys. Biggest toy sold about 10 million, probably.
What about the New Yorker that was leaving angry messages?
What?
The New Yorker that was
Oh no,
leaving
I
angry-
kept working with him.
Okay.
He's one of my advisors now. He always gives me a hard time. He calls Silicon Valley. He's like, I tell him like, yeah, we're 24 people. He's like, oh, God, you Silicon Valley people in your romper room, like with all these like expensive employees, like I could do that with 8 people. Like, yeah, sure you could. But, he has solid advice, like keep it simple, stupid. And, yeah, he taught me a lot of things. It was really fun. Like in the toy industry, you get to pitch ideas to them, and it's very lucrative. If you get your toy selected, you get a back-end royalty on it. So people become very wealthy doing toy design. So I was always like ready to do like pitching. And this kind of leads up to, maybe it taught me some of the lessons for pitching to raise money. So the first year I got to pitch, I'm so excited. I make the Nerds toy. It had a display, it had LEDs, it had knobs, and processors in it. It doesn't even matter what it did. But all of us would love it. You know, I could sell 50 of them for sure. And so I go and I pitch it to them, and they are so mean to me. I was like getting teary-eyed because they were just so harsh on me. And I move out of the conference room, and later on in the day, Frank pulls me aside. He's like, "Hey kiddo, this is how it works. Let me explain pitching." He's like, "First of all, like, you didn't tell me who your audience was. Second of all, you didn't tell me the economics of it, you know, and all these things about making a great product." He's like, "You need to pitch it that way. It's going to be for a 12-year-old boy. The economics are it's going to be gross margin of 200%, and it's going to go into this retail channel, and kids are going to love it because X, Y, Z." And he also taught me things like, you know, you should make a persona on who you're going after. You need to understand them. You may have to role play this person. So you're not a 12-year-old boy, but you may have to get Lincoln Logs and sit cross-legged on the floor and pretend you're, you know, this kid, try to get really into their mind, and then design your toy, and then validate it and test it, and so it's all good advice with a harsh hand. Well, that was a lot.
It was great.
And that was a great example of why I love meetups. Great stories. No,
You
seriously.
shouldn't have let me go free more.
No, I'm so glad I did. Believe me, I hope everybody is. I enjoyed the heck out of it. Thanks for So yeah, I think we're supposed to leave by 10. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, but it seems like we've got the whole place to ourselves.
Yeah,
They said it's-
nope,
they said
nobody
it's
cares.
fine.
He
Great.
said, just make sure that it's, you know,
Somebody
in a
closes
decent
the
amount of
door.
shape and shut the door when you leave.
I'm,
So
I'm responsible, so don't steal anything.
the
please.
place is
Yeah.
ours.
Yeah, thank you both, Leo, Jerry. These were great talks. My mind is spinning, and I took many mental notes about the things you said. So, everybody else, thank you for asking questions. This is the end of the formal part. My question to you for the audience tonight is, do you want to do one of these again in a month, or wait a couple months? So who wants to get together in a month, at the end of July? Who's like okay with a couple of months? All right, so maybe we do one, maybe we won't. It's not really conclusive. We'll find out. We'll see if we get a good venue. If you guys have a good venue, let me know. Maybe we'll hit up Jerry one time for a Till 5 visit when they're ready for us.
Till 5 offices are fun.
They are fun. It's super fun.
Nice.
And not everything has to be a a meetup. Like we could do events too, like the VRBQ that you wanted to do,
Yeah.
or the swap meet. So those are also less pressure. You can also just come in. Like a swap meet might be like 4 hours, and the tables are gonna be there the whole time. But you could come in for like 20 minutes, see what you want, and leave, and that's gonna be normal too. So.
Just to throw in a note, the Bay Area Unity user group is having a meeting until 5 on July 27th.
Great. Put it on the Discord because a lot of people here use Unity.
Drop it in there,
We're
I'll
curious
pin it.
about it. Yeah, so this is like the end of the formal part of the talk. Mike, thank you so much for streaming and being basically a one-man production studio. And Nima, I think, recorded 95% of the night in stereo at 180 that we'll post up eventually in a few days or something. For now, for those of you who haven't been to Meetup before, now you get to meet everybody you've been sitting around. And I highly recommend it. So we have time to mingle. There was some talk about getting, normally we have pizza and sodas. We couldn't do that this time, but Castro Street is just a couple miles away, which has got like endless bars and restaurants. If you guys want to form up into a big group or a bunch of smaller groups and get some pizza and chat, we're always up for that. And yeah, feel free to get up and move around. And Jerry, did you bring anything to share or to show?
I could here. I don't have much time, but we can maybe.
Sure, yeah. Whatever time you want to give it.
I have a couple swag items. We love our retro stuff, so if anyone interested in a Till 5 kind of, do you want that one? Okay, that's yours. 20-sided dice with T5 is critical role.
I got one of those. Thanks,
Anyone?
So real quick, does anyone have any community announcements or company announcements from their projects, their games, their companies? If anyone wants one, hop on up and you got like a minute to pitch your thing.
Some things that's not standing on.
Greg, do it.
Hello everyone, I'm Craig Douglas, I'm from Context CI. So Context CI focuses on haptics. We call our form of haptics multi-force ergonomic haptics, meaning that your hand sense of touch, it has multiple layers of data that you bring in, but also the ergonomic aspect of the fact that you have these 27 degrees of freedom and you're never thinking about them. You're never running your hand into an object as hard as you can, but what is that convincing level that comes to tell you, hey, I'm about to make contact with that object, and what are the physics that are going to happen once I do make that contact? I'm around frequently here or there, but I just wanted to say hello to everyone so that if you do see me, I do love to give demos and show them off. We're a simple 1 pound Bluetooth device that allows you to plug it in directly with the Quest and, as we like to say, feel the unreal. So, nice
Bring
to
it
meet
with you?
I do have them with me, so
Sweet.
happy to show them.
Great. Yeah, break it out if you want. If you have time to give it to
Yeah, happy to do so.
Cool. All right, thanks. Anybody else?
I brought the Snap Spectacles, the next gen ones. If you want to try those, go find me. And I also brought the new KuCam Ego 3D camera. So if you want to try that, also come find me.
And if you come back next time and you had a good time tonight, tell a friend. We're basically resurrecting the community from 3 years of not meeting up. So we're gonna keep an eye on the Discord and on Twitter, and love to have you back. And that's it. So go talk to each other, start a company, make a location-based arcade,
Make a game.
develop your Tilt 5.
Yep.
It's really easy. And that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, kids, that's it for the live stream. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.